Carly.
Yes.
You thought you got away with this.
Uh-oh.
But I'm going to tell everybody that you hit record on the first camera and then went to hit record on the second camera and it was pointing entirely the wrong freaking direction.
It's all right, I know.
Sorry, aren't you a photographer? Don't you like point camemmers from?
No, don't you start.
This kind of your thing.
Don't you start. This is going to be my first rant of the podcast. All you people out there who are commenting on the video, the audio, the whatever, can you just bear in mind that this is a free podcast? We do this voluntarily. And we're not throwing $100,000. I know you guys want Joe Rogan level production. You want Diary of a CEO production. But we don't got that budget. We don't have 20 staff.
So this is something I laughed my backside off. I was working with a guy a little while ago who was helping with some of my work and funding some of my work. And he insisted to my face that all these big podcasts, it's just the podcaster and like maybe one other person in the room.
Are you joking?
I said, wait until you actually see a real behind the scenes shot of, let's take Russell Brand. So he's done a walk around of his studio. There's about 12 people in that little intimate, that little space he's got there. It looks like his lovely, relaxed little, it looks like he's just walked into his spare yoga room and turned the camera on himself. There's 12 freaking people in the room with him. That's what it takes to get that level of production. So if you'd like to fund that for us and provide us with the budget, then you can criticize.
Seriously, I don't think people realize what goes into it. Like, I've been doing my own YouTube videos as well. You should subscribe at Carl's J Soda. And, so I obviously have my professional gear, right?
Yeah.
That's my day-to-day. That's my bread and butter. I can't have that gear tied up in a podcast studio. And the whole, setting it all up, rigging it all up, and then pulling it all back down again. It's just a massive waste of time. No. So everyone's like, why don't you use your professional camera? Because that's how I earn my living, right? So all the gear that's in here is stuff that I have in surplus that we can use to build the podcast. And slowly I'm upgrading. We're buying new mics and all that sort of stuff. But I think in this room right now, I can easily say over 10K. Probably more. And, whether it's the furniture or it's the lights, it's the microphones, it's the cameras. At the moment, we've got 3 cameras. They're DJI action cameras. I'm sorry, guys, I don't have 20 grand to throw at new Sonys with nice G-Master lenses.
What?
I know. God.
So disappointed. Now, however, rant over. I'm terminating your rant because we're supposed to start with good news. Good news. And I have some good news.
You got a new book.
My new book has come out.
It's a lovely front cover.
It is a lovely front cover. I don't know who designed that. I'm pretty sure I did that one myself.
Yeah,
actually.
someone
That
with good type.
No, that was no.
You
That was
fought me
totally
on that cover.
That was totally me. Yeah, actually, I did. I did not like this design of the options that I was given first, and I fought it. And in the end, it won because it was the best. And you knew it was the best from the start. You annoying little designery person, you. But it looks great. And look, honestly, as my first 2 books. Come on. It's not bad. Not bad.
I will say this too, not to blow smoke up your ass, because I rarely give you a compliment. I actually really enjoyed your first book. Not to just joke, but it was when I say an easy read, he's breaking the set.
I'm breaking my books.
I'm trying to give you a compliment.
I'm breaking my books.
I found it quite easy to read and get through, and really good arguments and really digestible, so that you could take away those arguments and use them when you're in conversation with people. And so if you guys are interested, it's actually a really good book.
Oh, well, thank you. And actually, that's kind of music to my ears. We didn't set this up, by the way.
He's going to pay me later.
No,
then I can buy the cameras.
Because I wrote it, I had my 14-year-old niece in mind when I was writing it, because I wanted to make it digestible. I didn't want it to be one of those books. Some authors, you can just tell they're trying to show off their vocabulary and they're trying to impress you. It's like, oh, get out of it. So I wrote it. I have a niece who at the time was 14, and I literally had her in mind as I wrote it. I went, right, I'm writing this for you. And I'm really happy with the result. You
actually just nailed something that I say to all my clients, which is for example, when we're making social media content, the first bit of advice I always give people is stop trying to flex to your colleagues or other people in your industry.
Yes.
What you're trying to do is prove that you know what you know. And for example, if I was going to make photography social media content, I'm trying to prove to other photographers I know what I'm talking about. When the reality is they're not your audience. What your audience is either the beginners or the people who know absolutely nothing about what you're talking about. So if you're talking in all this industry speak, it's just going over people's heads. So what you want, if you're trying to bring people into the fold, if you're trying to encourage conversations, actually simplify your language.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more, but that's not what we're here to have a podcast about.
Well, you missed it last week. I did a write on my own.
Look, I've seen the feedback, and you did more than a write on your own.
It was hard. Do you know what? Like, just on this, like, I don't want to come into this and just ramble. I try and research. Like, I've got show notes in front of me. I spend a good 24 hours doing this.
Carly puts more work into this than I do. Shh.
Yeah.
Just don't tell her.
I edit the thing. I do the
Hey,
thumbnails.
I'm taking over
I
the
do
editing.
the show notes.
Because it was your silly mistake to volunteer to do the editing.
I've given up.
I'm taking it back. I had it to start with. I'm taking it back.
But when it comes to these show notes, right, like the first thing I do is I go through what's happened in the last week. And I can't keep up. You can't keep up. There's too much.
No.
But then, you know, if you're going to talk about it, you want to be able to, like, come to it with the facts and know exactly what's going on. But again, with what I just said about the whole point of this podcast and why we're doing it is we're not trying to flex our intellectual prowess.
Yeah,
we're not trying to be academic. If you want that, go to Jordan Peterson. Like, what this is two mates sitting down talking about the news, which is what we want to encourage you guys to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I would ask you for your good news from this week, but I feel like this might be the wrong week to ask for that.
Yeah, I don't have any good news this week.
Yeah.
Should we start with that?
Look, I think we have to, because we've been talking about this literally since the very first episode of this podcast. And this week has been an explosive one in the news and a very unfortunate one for you personally.
I just feel like at this point, I'm so exasperated, but I don't know how else to articulate this. Like, I'm speaking from first-hand experience, but also just out of sheer frustration of how incompetent people are in Victoria. And like,
we haven't mentioned what the topic is.
No, I will.
So
I'll get into it.
Everyone's sitting there like, what?
I'm talking about youth crime, surprise, again. And the reason being is on the weekend, I was shooting a wedding. It was 40 degrees, we're in the city, and it was a huge wedding. This is a 10-day shoot. So in my car, I had all my lighting gear, I had an extra gear bag, I obviously had my cameras, and I wear them like a harness. So camera each side, 2 different lenses, batteries, filters, scrims, all the things, right? And we drove through 5 or 6 different locations. We're at the ceremony, then we're at the pre-getting ready phase, the ceremony, and then we went to all these different spots for the photos. We ended up Parliament, we're at the gardens, you know, all over the place. And in between all of that, my car was broken into, and $11,000 of my photography equipment, the equipment I used to make money to live, stolen by teenagers. And they were so excited by what they stole from me. It happened to include a bank card, and we'll go into that in a minute. They took themselves on a spending spree, $1,100 before my bank finally stopped the card. Do you know what they bought? Hennessy whiskey and MCO beauty products from Chemist Warehouse and assorted other things, $1,100. And my frustration with this is just, it's already so hard as a small business. It's already so hard as a victim of crime. And it happens again. And I'm so angry. And I don't know how to channel this rage.
Well, justifiably so, because there's so many layers to this. Statistically speaking, 70% plus of Victorian crime is committed by repeat offenders.
Yep.
So there's a 70% chance that the people or person who broke into your car is already known to police, is quite possibly out on bail. We know that's happening a lot. We don't know the specifics in this particular case, but we know that that's happening a lot. This is a known problem that our government has chosen to do nothing about. And we've been warning since the beginning of this podcast, and in fact, you know, on social media since last year and the year before, and for quite some years now, if the government doesn't take the crime problem seriously, people will start to take matters into their own hands. And this week, while your car was being stolen, a father and son were trying to recover a stolen set of earpods that had that Find My Earpods feature.
AirPods, yeah.
The AirPods. They followed that tracker. It led them to a car park, a Bunnings car park, and I think it was Broadmeadows, where they had an altercation with 4 individuals who were responsible for stealing the AirPods, and both of them ended up getting stabbed. The father, I believe, went to hospital in what I believe was a critical condition.
Yeah.
I don't have an update. I don't know where that
stabbed multiple times. Yeah.
And so, not only now do we have the victims of crime on the one hand, someone like yourself saying there's $11,000 worth of gear that you've fought hard to save up for, to buy. They are essential tools of your trade. You're now down gear for the next wedding that is the thing that's supposed to be able to, that's the work you do to pay the bills and to buy new gear. But now you need to buy the gear in order to do the work. It puts you in a terrible catch-22. The police, unfortunately, are very unlikely to ever recover that gear. And unfortunately, we know that the perpetrators are very unlikely to get caught. If they are caught, they're very unlikely to be remanded in custody until trial. And when they go to trial, they're very likely to walk out again and reoffend if they haven't already reoffended whilst on bail.
Let me make this clear as someone who's now gone through this twice. It's not the stuff they stole, but on that, I'll tell you what they stole. They stole my lighting bag. This thing's huge. It's like 1 metre or so long. It's full of extension cords, C-stands, some umbrellas, my flashlights, as in like my strobes. And then they stole a second bag, which happened to be a Marc Jacobs bag. I'm sorry, I like nice things. I should be able to buy fucking whatever I want and not have it stolen. And in that were 2 filters. One was an ND filter, that's $400. The other one was a CPL filter, that's $250. I had 2 lenses, a prime 50mm and a 15 to 35. And I had a bracket that you put your flash into so you can mount the flash and use it remotely. I had the flash trigger in there. Assorted other things. It happened to have my wallet. Don't come at me, I'll explain this in a second. And in my wallet was obviously my bank cards, my license, my Medicare, all those things. And they also stole my gym bag. And in my gym bag was a sweaty pair of runners, some Lululemon leggings, and a tank top.
They'll show up on OnlyFans soon. Someone will be,
they were sweaty.
Get Carly's sweat. No, but that's what makes them valuable on OnlyFans.
Yeah, I had literally used them. And then, this is the one that sent me. This is the one that sent me. In the back of my Jeep, I had like an old Decuba puffer jacket. Coincidentally, the one that Current Affair found me. So it's got some heritage to it. And that puffer jacket's just in my in my car, just like if the weather goes to shit, and it's just there for emergencies. They stole that. And I'm sitting there going, anything that wasn't bolted down in my car, they took. Now people are going to be like, well, why the hell is that in your car? Because I'm doing my goddamn job.
Yeah.
Like, what did you want me to do? Be a pack mule? Put it on my back?
That is the ultimate in victim blaming, to say, oh, well, you shouldn't leave things in your car. Well, I'm sorry. If we live in a place where it's not safe to leave things in a locked vehicle because people who are known to be criminals are out on the street being criminals again, well, that's not a failure of me leaving stuff in my car. That's a failure of the justice system to actually deal with these people.
And I will say this too to the trolls, because I know you're going to enjoy this one. It wasn't a targeted attack. They didn't see me with my gear. They weren't like waiting. I was one of 7 cars that were attacked. It was parked in the street. It was parked in broad fucking daylight. And these little pieces of shit, I'm sorry, I'm swearing, I'm angry. Do not tell me not to swear right now. Just help themselves to my livelihood. It's no different to a tradie having his work ute stolen. And like the thing is, those things they stole from me, they're not worth much to sell on marketplace, right? One of my lenses, it's a 50mm prime. It looks like it's gone through a meat grinder. The thing is though, I know it's not broken. I've had it since new. I dropped it. I know it works. But any other photographer is going to look at that and go, hell no, I'm not buying that. They'd be lucky to get $50 for it. But to replace it, it's $2.5 grand. So all of that stuff, I'm not using it all day, every day on set. I'm using it when I need a CPL filter, or when I need the ND filter, or I need that for this specific thing. You know the nuances of photography. So now I can't do that, which means that I'm impaired to do my goddamn job. And I'm angry. I'm fucking angry because nothing is being done about it.
So, well, Jacinta Allen would say that she is taking decisive action because now, having just had the stabbings that we had where the 2 people were the father and son were trying to recover their AirPods, got stabbed in the car park of a Bunnings, Jacinta Allen has come out and said, we're going to get tough on knife crime. That sounds like a perfect
blame
solution.
The knife.
Yeah, blame the knife.
Yeah. Because you can't get a knife from any kitchen in this state.
Yeah.
It's got to be the people selling the knives that are the problem, right?
Well, that's right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to keep the police even busier doing stop and searches on random people or prosecuting other relatively victimless crimes. I remember when the first knife laws were brought in Australia, I was in my late teenage years. I was doing a lot of techie work, a lot of audio engineering work. And so I would travel to and from work sites I used to have a Leatherman on my belt. That's just, it's just where it lived. And then all of a sudden I couldn't have it on my belt when I was walking down the street. I had to have it in my bag. And then I'm all nervous going down the street thinking, well, what if the police find me with a knife and they don't believe that I'm on my way to work because I was younger than the average person when I started working full time when I was 13, lied about my age to do it. So I'm stressing about all these things instead of just getting on with my day and getting on with my job because I have a damn Leatherman. These sorts of laws usually create more problems than they solve, and they certainly create more administrative and logistical overhead. They waste an enormous amount of effort for the police, for the courts, for the people that get caught by it, without actually stopping anyone from getting hurt.
I think it's performative action. It's literally like, oh, what can we look like we're busy doing something through? That's all it is. It's not. You're not actually targeting it. I'm sorry. The solution is to jail these thugs. That's it. I'm sorry, and you and I disagree with this all the time. The sentiment...
Not by as much as you think. Like, we do disagree a little bit, but not massively. If someone commits another violent offence whilst on bail, they should not get bail a second time.
But this is the thing, right? Like, we know they're doing it. They need to be swept up, thrown in prison for the next decade, because if you don't set that precedent, it doesn't fear the next generations of criminals. Like, it doesn't put the fear into them. Yeah. This is the thing. They know the laws are lax. They're laughing. They don't care.
So judges talk all the time about the importance of general deterrence and specific deterrence. These are two of the numerous factors that they take into account when they're giving sentencing. And what I wonder is why they don't appear to be taking the principle of general deterrence into account when it comes to bail. Releasing people on bail on this kind of Rex Hunt, catch him, kiss him and let him go, is the reverse of a deterrence, right? It's you are not deterring anybody, let alone in the sentencing itself. And yet they make such a big deal out of it when they do sentencing, whilst letting people go.
But why have we gotten to the point where this is the part about the left that I just cannot fathom, and I need someone to explain this to me like I'm 5. How can you defend this? How can you say, oh, but they come from tough upbringing, oh, they've got it hard? What about the victims? What about the victims who don't feel safe in their own home? For those who don't know, 3 months ago, we had a home invasion. Our car was stolen. Now my car has been robbed. Like, I don't feel safe in this state, and I'm not going to recover that anytime soon. I have night terrors. I don't sleep. I'm constantly stressed. Not only that, the interruption to my life and my business. Now my ability to generate income has been impeded. Why doesn't someone give a shit about that? I don't care about some 15-year-old thug. What I care about is the yous and the me's who pay the taxes, who contribute fairly, and we get treated like shit. Our rights are upheld, and we just have to sit here and just go, oh, okay, no worries, in the face of some ideological fucking utopia that the left are trying to propagate. It's not going to happen. And this is what's happening. You're going to see these vigilantes. I've been saying this for years, and it's happening, and now people are going to get stabbed, and I know, and you know, and I don't want to call it, but we know it's going to happen. People are going to get murdered. That is the next escalation point. And what happens? It's us that will have the retribution from the government, not the criminals.
So there's so many layers to what you said. Everything you just said is absolutely true. And whether it's the criminals that end up dead or whether it's the people trying to be vigilantes that end up dead, it's still a terrible outcome to have that kind of thing happening on the streets. But this is only... The risk of this happening only exists because the government is failing to do its job properly. Victims of crime. So I'm a libertarian. I'm a big anti-victimless crimes person. If there isn't a victim, there isn't a crime. But if there is a victim, there's a crime. And it is completely legitimate to then use, yes, force where necessary to apprehend somebody, to gather the evidence, to put them on trial, to figure out whether they're guilty or not. And if they're guilty, to apply a punishment to them that as much as possible restores back to the victims what they lost and makes sure acts as a deterrent. Make sure everyone goes, whoa, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. But what happens is we, for politically correct reasons, usually racially based, we turn a blind eye to certain things. And I want to jump back 20 years. December 2005 is
Cronulla
when
riots.
You may remember the Cronulla riots being all over television, these race riots, these evil, racist white people. Well, what actually happened there was not dissimilar to what's happening now, where we had a group of people who felt very emboldened because the authorities were not dealing with them. They were taking over the beach. They were being extremely antisocial. They were in some cases being violent. And then the trigger was when they actually beat up a lifeguard on Cronulla Beach. And that's what set the riots off. Sounds exactly like Victoria right now. Then the community pushed back. And it wasn't racist. The issue was that one particular race of people were being allowed to get away with things that no one should be allowed to get away with. Right? And so, they were pushing back against that group of people, not because they're racists, but because the authorities were failing to deal with a very real problem.
The issue I have around talking about race, though, is like now it's the unspeakable pink elephant in the room. It's just a way of distinguishing groups of people. It's not some kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? I've got to be so careful with this on YouTube, but like, it's not sort of alluding to a less than. It's not racism.
It's not a judgment, it's a description.
You are literally saying a group of people, and you're seeing this now. Like, I said this to my partner last night. I normally go to the beach every day in summer. I'm always there in the morning. I go for a swim, or in the afternoon. I've been twice this year. And that is because at my beach, there is a certain group of people who are at that beach being disruptive, being loud, and making me feel generally uneasy. And I can tell you, they don't look like your average beach goer. They're wearing puffer jackets, they're wearing beanies, and it's a 35-degree day. You try and figure out who I'm talking about. I am not going to my own beach for that reason. And I'm sorry, but if we can't mention the race, then we can't have a proper discussion.
So what we've got now is a situation where, thanks to Daniel Andrews being soft on crime and Jacinta Allen continuing that, we are primed. It is now an explosive situation. People are getting stabbed in Bunnings car parks over AirPods right now. That is absurd. That is, what a weird sentence to even have to say. We are primed for something that is going to make the Cronulla riots look like playtime. And
I have to be honest with you, Chris. Like, I think it has to happen. I'm not encouraging violence, and very clear this is not an incitement. What I'm saying is, I don't think the conversation is being heard. We're getting platitudes from the Premier. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, that's not good. Do you know how many people have said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that? Are you, though? Do you genuinely feel sympathy for the fact that I now can't do my job? Do you? Because I don't think you do.
Well, certainly we can say the people that have the power to change it, if all they're doing is saying, oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's like thoughts and prayers when there's a gun mass shooting in the US.
And if there's if someone's not in a position to actually do anything about it, well, then thoughts and prayers are the best they can do. But when we've got the people in the position of power, people like Jacinta Allen, who has talked about bail reform. Well,
she came out yesterday saying the young children walking around with machetes is disturbing. Is it though, Jacinta? This has been happening for years. Yeah. You know about it. Yeah. It's on the news every night, and I don't watch the news, but on X you see the clips from 7, from Channel 9. Fifi Box on Fifi and Fev has come out saying this. She's like, this is mainstream stuff. Everyone is talking about this. There is no action being taken, and I know I sound like a broken record, but how in good conscience can you defend this? I do not understand. This is no longer political. This is right versus wrong. Our city has become Gotham City.
It's not political, but it is ideological.
Yeah.
Right, you understand, if this was a group of Australian-born white young men running around doing this, you better believe the police would have been called in, because they're not ideologically protected. No. Whereas immigrant groups, second-generation immigrants, etc., are ideologically protected. That's almost a religious article for the left, as much as I don't like the left. But
sorry to cut you off. What we're getting now is copycats as well, because one group did it and they've done it repeatedly. So now the next group is going, oh well, if they're not getting caught, we're going to do it. Yeah. And now it's prolific, and people are like, oh, that's happening in Ballarat, it's happening in Bendigo, it's happening in Queensland. Yep. Yes, because they're emboldened. They film it, they put it on social media, they encourage everyone. It's just like the trans movement. It's a social contagion.
Yeah, and regrettably, if it is allowed to get much worse, then you're going to end up being right in the sense that we need a Bukele kind of reaction. Yeah. We need that kind of.
I've been calling this, and I honestly, and I'm sorry, like maybe I'm heightened emotion. I'm trying to calm myself down. It's really hard, because it's so raw. It only happened this weekend. I don't think any more discussions is going to help. I agree with you, and I don't want breaches of human rights, and I do believe in human rights, but at this point, my human rights are far more valuable than these thugs. I'm sorry, but it's true. If these people cannot contribute, if they're not willing to learn after the first or second bail or whatever they've had, charges, then they're never going to. The tone must be set, not in this state. It is going to be taken seriously and take them out of the community. I'm sorry, I don't have any apologies for saying that.
And it doesn't require human rights abuses. It just requires us as a community and for the Premier and the judicial system to all agree that no one who recommits an offence they're on bail for can get bail a second time. That's literally the problem goes away. Every single person that is currently out on bail having broken bail previously needs to get scooped up and put back into custody. Every single person from now on that is on bail and recommits an equal or more serious offence does not get bail again. They're remanded in custody until their hearing. That is not a human rights violation. That's just law and order. That's just saying you respect the system, you respect the justice system, and you behave accordingly. And if you won't, then we won't give you the opportunity to go out on the street and do it again.
Well, this will infuriate you.
That's just what I need on it.
Someone I speak to regularly on Instagram told me they went and sat in the Moorabbin Magistrates Court where most of these cases are heard, or for my area. And she sat there for the entire day and listened to these kids get up and the defence speak on their behalf. And the judge's cavalier attitude was basically like, oh, well, just don't do it again. She was so enraged by just how unsympathetic the judge was to the victims. Like, one particular case stands out. This teen stole a car, was driving at 200 kilometres per hour on the Monash freeway, is out on bail 30 plus times, and was let out on bail again. Now, this is the thing, right? And I'm sorry, but I need to give you this extreme example, and if you're triggered, well, grow the fuck up. If this judge had a daughter, and that daughter is driving on her P's, going to Monash Uni down the freeway, and this 15-year-old kid in the stolen car clips her at 200 kilometres an hour and she smashes into that freeway wall, do you think the judge then would give a shit? But what if that person's you? Or what if that person's me? Does the judge think my life is less valuable than their own child? Because that is the tone they are setting.
Judges don't really think about anyone besides their own promotions and their standing within their little social club, which is mostly made up of other judges and QCs and so forth. It is its own little alternate universe. It's the ultimate example in Australia, I believe, of an ivory tower.
Yeah.
Because they are above
completely
criticism.
Detached from reality.
You're not allowed to criticise them. They are incredibly hard to fire. So once they get in, it's very hard to get rid of them. All they can do is go onwards and upwards and make more and more money. And you know, we've seen examples of judges and magistrates making obvious, blatant errors of fact in their judgments or blatant errors of fact in their sentencing, and yet if the person who's been sentenced based on an error of fact or found guilty based on an error of fact wants to set that right, they have to go and pay more money to appeal it further up the chain. And this judge is never held accountable for having made an actual genuine error of fact, not in the opinion of anyone, but on the papers.
Yeah.
And we see that. There's entire groups set up around this saying, hey, the courts need to be held accountable here. The courts, actually, there needs to be some kind of a feedback mechanism back to the judges. Yeah. And this is where I do think the Americans have something right that we've got very wrong. They directly elect a large number of their judges, and the other judges are appointed by people who are directly elected. And the criticism of that is, but that makes it political. We shouldn't politicise the justice system. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, that's also accountability. Yeah. That also means that there's a mechanism by which we the people could fire these judges who are letting kids out for the 30th time on bail. Yeah. And in Australia, there is no mechanism that I'm aware of for we the people to actually give feedback to these judges and say, hey, that's not acceptable.
Actually, the converse is true, that if you bring the court into disrepute or you bring criticism on the court or a magistrate, you can actually be held in contempt. That's a crime.
Which is madness. And then if they charge you with contempt, who do you get judged by? The court.
Correct. You know, and it's just
like if that's not a conflict of interest.
It's infuriating because, like, you know, I said on my Instagram this morning, I was like, I actually am not political by nature. It's not something like, I'm not a political commentator by any stretch. I'm a photographer who became political around the implementation of the political correctness. Around, I think it was like 2018, and it started over a certain moment, right? And I'm going to tell you this story because you can see what it was that set me off on this path. I had a clothing company, and you know, you get samples made in China, they get sent over to you, and then you shoot those samples whilst you're waiting for the rest of the production to come in. Yeah. And it just so happened the samples they sent me were extra small, like they were tiny, you know, and you pay, it's like $60 US for one sample. And I don't have the time to wait for them to remake the samples, whatever. And I put out a thing on my Instagram and I said, hey guys, I'm looking for someone that fits an extra small crop top. I need to do a shoot next week. And the backlash was insane. Like, oh, you're only promoting skinny people. And I was like, I literally have one top. It's this big. Yeah. What do you want me to do? Yeah. Squeeze a size 16 into it?
Also, skinny people exist.
Right?
And you as a clothing importer, as a clothing label, you're allowed to make clothes for skinny people too.
It was just, it became a massive thing. That was my very first taste of like social media, not cancelling, but like outrage.
Yeah, just that.
And I was like,
what is wrong with you?
You've made this story up. This is not us. This is not real. It's just literally like this is the situation. Anyway, And I was a company that was known for making clothes to fit the athlete. Yeah. So I was just like, what are you talking? Yeah. Anyway.
And actual athletes are not skinny like that for the most part, depending on the sport. But a lot of athletes, they don't fit the skinny stereotype.
And that was the thing. It was like my first taste of just like, this is what the internet can do. And that was like around 2018. And I remember, I've told you this, when Hillary lost to Trump, I was like, oh, damn, we lost Hillary. Trump's a monster, because that's what the media had told me. Yeah. And around that 2018, 2017 kind of period, I started to realize that when there's all this projection onto one thing and there's this massive commotion around one entity, particularly Donald Trump, I was like, that's a distraction. And it became very clear that, like, it's a diversion, right? Yeah. And so that was what started it. So it's the political correctness campaign, and then obviously COVID, and you guys know the rest is history. But, I actually don't want to spend my days talking about politics, but I am now a victim of policy that's been implemented in my state that this government has put through and is doing nothing about. Yep. That's why I'm political.
Yep. Elections matter. I'm sick and tired of these people that are like, oh, don't, there's this new campaign, don't vote at the next federal election. Like, just opt out, we'll send them a message. No, you freaking won't. Yeah. Opting out and choosing not to vote, donkey voting, or not showing up and copying the fine, whatever, does not send anybody a message. What you're doing is making yourself irrelevant. There's some idiot on X saying this at the moment, abort the vote. Yeah, trying to do this sort of nonsense. And honestly, I don't know whether he genuinely believes it or whether that's an attempt to try and sow discord. I genuinely don't know. But it doesn't help, because whether we like it or not, someone's going to sit in the big chair and make decisions. Yeah. And if that person makes bad decisions, we suffer. Correct. If that person makes less bad decisions, we suffer less. Yeah. I don't like the fact that there's a big chair. Yeah. If we could eliminate the big chair, that'd be great, but that's not an option from where we are. We need to get involved and try and improve the quality and calibre of the person who sits in that chair.
There seems to also be this sentiment where people want everything or nothing at all. Like, it's all or nothing. Like,
so the phrase is letting perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, it's only good. Well, that's not good enough. Yeah. Right? Well, hold on. It's a big improvement on where we've been. Yeah. Let's accept that and now try and work towards more.
Like, to bring it to Australia, people are like, oh, Dutton's just another, shill, whatever. I'm like, maybe he is, and I'm not saying I like Dutton, but he's a hell of a lot better than Albanese. Well,
the situation with Australian politics at the moment is actually less for me about which one is better and more about what does it say about us if we re-elect Albo after what he's been and what he's done. Dutton may not be any better, and my main focus is on getting as big a Senate crossbench as possible and maybe getting a few lower house minor party people in as well and just continuing the trend in that direction. That's actually my main focus. But secondary to that, if we re-elect Albo, he is going to take that as approval of his entire agenda. Mm-hmm. If we switch to Dutton himself may not be any better, but it's a mandate that says we're not happy with that direction. Yeah. Right? And that's a less bad message for we the people to send.
Yeah. And this is the thing, I think this is my frustration with people. Like, I was pretty volatile on my Instagram yesterday, and I was just saying to people, like, the time for niceties has really come and gone. Like, at this point, if you're not having political discussions, you are the problem. And I know people are, don't talk about politics, religion, or money, right? You have to, because look at what happens when you don't.
Correct.
Australians are so politically apathetic that they sit there and they go, oh, well, that's unfortunate. And then all of a sudden it happens to them, and then they're screaming blue murder. Well, sorry, but it's happened as a direct result of your inaction in the first place.
I think what I'm hearing, I think what you're telling me is that cutesy time is over.
How good's my shirt?
You need to move your hair.
Sorry, cutesy time is over.
Cutesy time is over. The Dan Bongino Show. Now, he's topical. We'll be talking about him later, but I do think we've kind of covered this.
I think you guys know where I see.
Yeah, let's maybe move
on. So this is my partner's shirt. I raided his wardrobe, and can I just brag about my partner for a minute?
Please do.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, he's one of our biggest fans, and he watches all of our podcasts. And
why wouldn't he?
Obviously,
right?
And he treats me like a princess, not really, but like, you know what I mean.
Treats you well.
He's the best.
That's a good thing.
And I thought I'd wear his shirt, given that Bongino has just been announced as Deputy Director of the FBI.
I did not see that coming.
No.
That was one that caught me off guard, but I was so thrilled to see it.
Do you know what is amazing? I was listening to a couple of people talk about this yesterday when we were talking about Bongino, is the amount of incentive for him to walk away from what he has. He has got a multi-million-dollar empire. Mm-hmm. He's got one of the biggest podcasts in America. Mm-hmm. And I think Tim Pool estimated his income annually to be around the 20 to 30 million US, give or take.
Yeah, probably.
And Dan Bongino is willing to give it all up to go and take a public service job for $200,000 per annum, which is nothing to be sniffed at, to go and do what's right for his country. Like, this is very much reinstating honour in politics again.
Okay, so it was actually, I had an epiphany when I saw the announcement with Dan Bongino, and I thought, why do I like this so much? Like, I like it, but why do I like it so much? Like, this is saying something to me that's deeper than just, oh, good, this person's in that job. And it took me a little while to distill what it was, and I realised what this was confirmation of something that's relatively, it's one of those things that's obvious once you see it. Trump is hiring for integrity. And people say, oh, he's hiring for loyalty. Well, yes, every single president appoints people that are going to be loyal to him. Like, that's a given. But actually, loyalty, genuine loyalty, isn't possible without integrity. And as I looked at Dan Bongino, I thought, this is actually the second time he's given up everything. The first time he gave up everything was when he came out against all the jabs and all of that nonsense to do with COVID. Because he had, his career pathway was set. All he had to do was not rock the boat. He's every bit as good as Tucker Carlson. He can be that on the the same scale as that, no problem.
Because he got fired by Fox, didn't he?
And he was one of the first ones. And he risked everything. And this is before Tucker. This is before Tucker proved that you don't need Fox. This is before that trail had been blazed. And he took the risk that he was going to lose absolutely everything in order to live in accordance with his values. So that says something enormous about the man. Years in the New York Police Department, years in the Secret Service, serving multiple different presidents from different political parties, non-partisan in that respect, goes on to have the opportunity to be Tucker's replacement if he only just towed the line and did what he was told, chose not to, built himself back up to the point that he's a multi-millionaire and making tens of millions a year. I think that's a pretty good estimate from Tim Pool, and then he gives it up again.
This is the thing about integrity. When I talk about values all the time. When you know those values and you are steadfast in them, it becomes a no-brainer.
It's easy.
He said on his podcast that if Trump tapped him on the shoulder, it would be an easy decision for him to walk away. And, I've said this before, if you don't know your values, other people will make sure you adhere to them. Or to theirs, right? And I think this is a perfect example of that. Like, when you have your values, the road may be rocky, but eventually it works out the way it should, right? But when you're beholden to other people's values, like, other ideologies that come in and out of fashion, and you're swaying in the breeze like that, you're never actually going to have level footing. And I know you can probably talk about Christian values now, but this is the thing, like, whether or not you're anchored to a faith, or you're just someone who's highly principled and has a strong moral compass, those people often become the oak trees in the forest. Everyone else is just flowing around in the breeze.
So let's just talk about values for a second, because I did an online course, a 6-week course, and 1 week was dedicated to values. Values are incredibly deep, incredibly powerful, incredibly important, but actually very easy to summarize. And it's relatively easy to figure out what yours are. It's in the word value. Why do we call them values? Well, it's because it's the thing you're willing to pay a price for. Something that's valuable is something you're willing to pay a price for. So if you're not sure what your values are, ask yourself, what have you been willing to pay a price for in the past? And what are you willing to pay a price for right now? If you say that you value your family, but actually your behavior and what you're willing to pay a price for is that you'll sacrifice your family for your career, that's telling you what your real values are. Just look at what you're willing to pay a price for. And this is why I say Dan Bongino has been willing to pay a price in order to stay true to what he believes, and is now willing to pay a price again in order to fight for the country that he loves. He has integrity, he knows what his values are, and I think he's going to be absolutely phenomenal in that role.
Do you think this was a calculated 5D chess move from Trump, knowing that Bongino was never going to get confirmed in the Senate? Kash was questionable. Kash comes through and he taps him on the shoulder and says, you're director, but you're tapping Dan on the shoulder?
Don't know. I like it as a hypothesis. I do. Here's the thing. People for a long time have been saying, oh, Trump is playing 5D chess, blah, blah, blah. I think that gives him too much credit. However, people then go, oh, you're just hating on Trump. No. There's a third way here. Trump operates the way that he operates because it works. It's extremely effective. And the number one thing that Trump prioritizes in every negotiation, in every business deal, and in every aspect of his life is flexibility to maneuver. He takes the path that gets him towards his objective and leaves him the most options possible when someone puts a roadblock in his way. So then someone puts a roadblock in his way and he sidesteps that roadblock and everyone's like, oh, 5D chess, he had that planned all along. No. He just knows what his contingency plans are before the roadblock lands, so he can maneuver and he can be very, very light on his feet. Would he potentially have planned to have Dan in that position beforehand? Almost certainly. He would have thought about it. He may very well have thought about the fact that he couldn't get a Senate confirmation. But I actually think oftentimes, in the same way that Donald Trump's not the one doing most of the stuff, it's the heads of the departments. Yeah. In the same way, these heads of departments are not the ones doing most of the stuff, it's the people under them. And actually, in Dan Bongino's case, he's actually a bit too high profile. It'll be the people that he now brings in under him that'll actually get the real work done. It's the people whose names you've never heard of.
The interesting thing, though, when you look at the fallout from those who oppose Trump and his appointees, is that he's an outsider. I can't remember who it was, but someone put up a massive argument saying that he's not qualified to be in the FBI. He's only been a New York cop, which is arguably one of the toughest police forces in the country. And he's been a Secret Service agent for the Obama and
Bush
administration. So he's been in those situations, but isn't that the best person from the job, an outsider, not someone who's been a government bureaucrat for their entire life? Like, if you want to talk about draining the swamp, bring someone in with a fresh set of eyes.
Not being a swamp creature is kind of the number one qualification at this point in time.
Yeah. And like I think Bongino said on his podcast a long time ago that they were irredeemably corrupt after the Mar-a-Lago raids. And he called for mass firings then, and everyone's like, oh, people are losing their jobs. Rightfully so. These people are incompetent, or worse, they're corrupt.
Yes.
And this is the same thing. It's like that, I'm so sorry for swearing a lot this podcast, but it's fuck around, find out. You've done the wrong thing. Now it's time to deal with the consequences.
All right, so I posted this up this morning because this might surprise you, but actually the New York Times has endorsed Dan Bongino as the assistant...
not Gino.
Dan Bongino, whatever. As the deputy FBI director. They endorsed him with this headline: Trump's new deputy FBI director has it out for the, quote, scumbag commie libs. And I thought that is a really bold way for the New York Times to endorse him.
Yeah, I agree. I
think he should just literally put that at the top of his resume.
Did you honestly think that in our lifetime we would be fighting communism and socialism again?
So I became aware in my teens that the ideology wasn't dead. So it's less of a surprise to me. And you go back to the Reds under the bed scare, McCarthyism, all this dark era of American history that people try to mock. If you actually go back and just read with an open mind the contemporary arguments at the time, it's going to feel really familiar to what we're facing right now. They don't operate under the term communist or radical or revolutionary or these sorts of things. They call themselves Greens, they call themselves progressives. They have new outfits that they wear. But
blue hair.
Well, but this
this
is why we call the Greens watermelons. They're green on the outside, but they're red in the middle. This is why the Greens aren't what they used to be. You know, they're no longer really about the environment. They've got all these other policies that have nothing to do with the environment. Why? Well, because they're no longer about that, really. They're actually a Marxist party that's rebranded. Julia Gillard herself, when she was, I can't remember the name of the publication, but she was the editor of a publication at her university. And she wrote in that it's time for the radicals to get rid of the hippie hair and put on suits and become a part of the establishment. What did she do? She got rid of the hippie hair, she put on a suit, she became part of the establishment, but she became Prime Minister of Australia. Had she dropped the ideology? No. You can see that in her policies. So, no, for me it wasn't that big of a surprise.
I know that I see this sentiment expressed often on X or, in social media that people, all politicians are dumb or like, there's no good options. You're right, and I would agree with you. And that's because the incentive to be a politician is so low. You're attracting, because Gareth and I were talking about this yesterday. How the hell did Anthony Albanese become Prime Minister? And the
Scott Morrison for that matter.
Or Scott Morrison, yeah, exactly. And the answer is because there was no other option.
So I talk about this actually in my book, which you should buy. I talk about this, the perverse incentives of politics, and how did we get here? How did we get to the point that we have just such a useless group of people to choose from? And it is actually unfortunately baked into the cake. There is no easy way to change that. Within the minor parties, the incentives are a little bit different, and that's why we do and can get some better people through the minor parties. But the unfortunate reality is at the moment, as those parties grow, the bad incentives will begin to come into play, and that's something we'll have to navigate down the road.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that now. I mean, you and I are both libertarians, and I support the libertarians, and even though we actually disagree with each other in a really healthy way. And I know I said before about if it's good but it's not perfect, then people don't want it. This all or nothing think tank, it's got to stop. And I see it on X all the time. And I think that's because these people are either emotionally charged or maybe, and I'm not saying this to downgrade or like to degrade them, I should say, is that it's low informed or at worst like low IQ. When they're sitting there critiquing everything, oh, well, that person's a shill because they support Israel, or that person's this because they did this once. It's I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is you want some altruistic, godly-like figure who's never wronged, who's lived their life exactly how you believe to be right.
Never wrong according to you.
And that's the person you believe is the right person for the job. Well, that's not humans. Humans are messy. We make mistakes, and how else do you learn? You have to make some concessions.
Yeah, and this is why one of the most important messages that I was on during all of the COVID lockdowns, the protests, the pushback, was to keep the message focused. Because every time we allowed someone to add another message into what the protests were about, that splits people, because not everyone agrees with that. And so this is actually a tactic that people who are against your movement will use, is they will try and add new topics to your movement. They'll try and get you to start carrying a big basket of goods rather than being focused on that one objective. Because every time they get you to go, oh yes, okay, we'll stand for this too, well, now you've just lost some people. And if you can add 10 new topics, and now you're trying to juggle all of these things, well, now your actual audience has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk as a result of that, because people are inclined only to work with you if they agree with you on everything. So we need to stay really, really focused when it comes to fighting these battles. We need to stay really focused. The Libertarians are a little bit different to most other parties in this sense. They base everything they do on a philosophy, a political philosophy that doesn't change. Now, yes, there is still room for different disagreements in interpretation of how we should apply that philosophy, but it's not based on, oh, how do we feel about this? It's based on, well, let's bring it back to libertarian principles. It's not whether you like it or not. Let's bring it back to that. There is still room for debate. But the problem that creeps in there, and I'm going to offend some people now, is that libertarianism becomes very cerebral. It becomes I refer to us because I'm one of them, as the Asperger elite. We are a weird bunch.
They are a very merry bunch of...
We read political
eccentrics.
Books. We read political books for fun. So when I brought my wife to her first libertarian conference, we walked in, and about half an hour later, she comes walking up to me, because we'd sort of split up and, whatever. She comes walking up to me, she goes, "These people need help with their marketing." And I'm like... These people need help with a lot more than just marketing, right?
Jay said that to me the other day. It's like, why are the libertarians so messy? And I'm like, because babe, they're not politicians. That's the thing.
Because they're all on the spectrum.
Yeah, and they're people who I think are more inclined to think critically, less than God, I hope I don't offend people saying this. People who are on the spectrum aren't so much emotional beings. They're far more analytical. Yeah. And so that's the space they play in. They're thinking about that. And they're over up here with that minutia.
Yep. And if you can make a policy argument that this thing is going to lead to, somewhat better outcomes across the board, even though, yes, lots of people will still get hurt, you go and passionately argue for that because it's an improved outcome. Yeah. Meanwhile, the individuals that are still getting hurt are rightly emotionally upset about that. And go, you're heartless and you don't care. Whereas us, as the Asperger libertarian person, goes, yes, but with this policy, there are less people in your situation than what there would have been if we'd gone the other way. Yeah. And you, unfortunately, you do need both. You need these people. Think about any army general. There has to be something weird about anyone that can sleep at night having sent people to their deaths in a combat situation. That's not an emotionally driven person. That's a person who sits there and looks at the battle plan and goes, if I give this order, 1,600 people are likely to die. If I give that order, only 1,000 people are likely to die. I'll give this order instead. Yeah. Right, that's a weird thing. Yeah. But we need that in certain contexts. And unfortunately, libertarians are made up almost entirely of
not all of us.
People. Not all of us.
I've been helping with a lot of the photography, and I'm helping David Limbrick set up his new podcast studio, which is exciting. Nice. So we're all sort of working behind the scenes. But what I was going to say on that is it's important to also be able to criticize your own party. Yes. For example, I'll give you something on the Libertarians. The New South Wales Libertarians have totally different branding to the rest of the country. And it just enrages me. I
think, if my memory serves me correctly, that's because federally they were working on a rebrand, but they didn't have time to get that done before the most recent New South Wales election. And so the New South Wales went their own way in order to have stuff for the election.
Wasn't there mutiny over this?
Look, there was conflict over it, but one of the dirty secrets of political parties is that it is way more violently divided behind the scenes. They fight against each other internally. This is not just the Libertarians, this is every damned one of them.
Yeah.
Without exception.
Yeah.
They fight each other more behind the scenes than what the parties fight each other in public. You think it's bad with the parties bickering in public, you should see what goes on behind closed doors. It's freaking scary.
And it's a lot of work as well, but we kind of got off track.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, we'll move on to the next one. I can't remember where I was going to go with that. But just back to the youth crime thing, what do you think about protesting in a post-COVID world?
So protesting has a place. It absolutely has a place. You need to know what your objectives are. There needs to be a purpose to it. It can't just be we're unhappy.
Yep.
So you need to have a specific set of outcomes that you're asking for. I think protest, except in the most exceptional of circumstances, needs to be done with the utmost respect for the people that you're going to be inconveniencing.
Yeah.
And so, if I was organising an anti-crime protest right now, would I notify the police and work with them? Absolutely, 100%. Of course, I would. Etc. Go through all the proper channels, do all the right things, organise to have a stage and speakers, and invite speakers from lots of different interest groups and so on. And just run it properly. Do a good job. I would suggest that if that was going to happen in Victoria, it needs to be in the next probably 2 months, so that there's a bit of lead time before the state election.
Yep.
So that's it's a federal election coming. When's the next state election? I've just gone and...
The next state election for us is 2026.
2026. My brain was in federal election mode. Okay.
No.
So in that case, you've got another year and a half of dealing with the same people in power, unless there's a leadership spill. So it's not about getting election promises. This protest would then be about forcing Jacinta's hand. So what you're actually trying to do is foment discontent and create an opportunity for someone who wants the top job to potentially challenge.
Yeah.
So that because Jacinta won't respond to public pressure. We know that because Daniel Andrews never did.
Yeah.
She is only concerned about her internal...
Because that would be making an admission of guilt.
Yeah, but she's only worried about her internal party position. And this is I've talked before about what happens when a state becomes a one-party state. They're no longer concerned about the opposition. They're concerned about their internal factional battles, which, as we just said, are way more vicious.
Yeah.
And so what you've got to do is focus the protest on giving an opportunity to a challenger internally.
Yeah.
Someone else who's sitting there going, "Oh, I could be the premier. I could do a better job. I could fix this problem. I could, I could carry favour with the people, and I've got my faction on my side. I might do a leadership step."
Yeah.
So you've got to focus who you choose as speakers, the topics that you give them, around making Jacinta believe that her leadership position within the party is vulnerable.
Yeah.
If you do that, you might get an outcome. But honestly, the likelihood of getting an outcome out of a single protest is extremely low.
I've considered organising a protest around youth crime, and the reason I say that, I've never organised a protest in my life.
Yeah.
I know that they can go terribly wrong, and people don't want the disruption. But for me, it was more so... I see it as a moment for the community to really come together. We're so divided on so many things, but this is something that I think is now affecting everyone. And again, it's no longer political, it's ideological. I think if there was some kind of like unification moment where Victoria is very divided, we know that. But when you start to have your home violated, your property violated, you're getting slashed up by machetes, I think there comes a moment where it's, let's put our grievances aside, because this is an issue that we can tackle together.
Yep.
And I'd like to organise a protest. And it's not so much like, my outcome would be to demand that Jacinta Allen immediately repeal her soft bail laws. That would be the outcome I would want. But more so what I want is to make people recognise that you are not alone. Like, I think so many people have this sentiment, but because of the nature we live in Australia, I think the US is changing significantly. But in Australia, you get shot down for speaking up. If you go against the group or you go against the clan, you are ousted, you are ostracised, you're exiled, and no one wants that, and it's already, life is already hard. So when I get hard on people for being cowards or not speaking up, I understand why they don't, but I think you have to. And so a protest could be an opportunity for people to come together and go, all right, on this, we'll stand together. So
I think probably the smart way to do it would be to focus the messaging squarely on Jacinta. So this is Rule for Radicals. Saul Alinsky, 1960s, 70s, published a book that basically was one of the guiding books for that whole movement. Actually, 50s, I think it might have been. And his advice, in amongst other things, the rules for radicals, one key one was that you have to personalise a problem.
Yep.
Right? So the problem can't be crime. Crime's not a person. You can't target a person. The problem is Jacinta Allen is soft on crime.
Yes.
So it's now a personal problem. You have to freeze it. Now, what that involves is finding things that she said and finding things that she's done that she can't walk back from. Yep. So she's now stuck in place. She removed the political mealy-mouthed manoeuvring room. You failed to do this, or you did do that. You said this thing. Will you now X, Y, or Z? And so you can freeze them in place using things I've already said or done. And then the final one is you attack relentlessly. You do not let up. And so this would have to be, the plan would have to be, you're marketing this as this is the first protest of however many it takes to fix this problem. Yeah. And if that's your marketing focus and it's personalised onto her, and you've got the quotes, you've got the receipts to say that she is the problem, one, the police will join you, because a lot of police members, I'm no fan of police, but a lot of the police members are absolutely fed up. They're sick and tired of this. They're demoralised.
I said this on last week's podcast when you weren't here. I said, like, I totally agree with you on everything about lockdown and the cops. And there needs to be a mass, like, reshuffle in the Victorian police. I honestly do think this is something that can bridge that gap. I'm not naive enough to think like it'll all be forgotten and we walk away skipping together. Not at all. What I'm saying is there needs to be a moment where we all start to recognise the humanity in each other and go, you know what, on this one we're united. On this one we can put aside our grievances, because I can't speak high enough of the cops when I've dealt with them in this particular issue. They're fed up. They're frustrated. So I think a protest where we can come together, I think that might be a good option.
So tell us what you think. Would you come? Would you support that? But before we move on, can I make a comment on police at an individual level are almost always amazing. There are exceptions, but there are in every single industry. The problem, and I'm actually thinking about writing my third book on this topic, and I need to talk to you about cover design because I have a concept for it. The title of my third book is likely to be Psychocrats.
Okay, Psychocrats.
Psychocrats. And it is based around the way that systems and bureaucracies are designed to make nice, ordinary people that at an individual level are lovely behave like psychopaths and participate in psychopathy, because that's ultimately what government does and is. And unfortunately, we've got a situation where police officers, no matter how nice they are at an individual level and how much you might like to have them over for a barbecue, when they're in that uniform and they're following the processes and the procedures,
following orders,
they're following their orders, but not even the Nazi reference following orders. They're going through the process. Sorry, just doing my job. Right? Sorry, that's not my department. They end up participating in psychopathy. And that's literally what a system is designed to do. Let me take the extreme example, Godwin's Law, all the rest of it. Let's take the Nazis. Someone is not going to, one individual person, there'd be very few people that would be willing to go and round up Jewish people, incarcerate them, load them onto a train, drive the train to Auschwitz, unload them, strip them naked, beat them up, shove them into a gas chamber, lock the door, go and turn the gas on, and then dispose of the bodies afterwards. To find a single individual that would be willing to do every single step of that process from start to finish would be a very rare and very psychopathic individual. But if you break that process down into lots of little component parts, all you have to do is turn the gas on. You're just turning a valve. All you have to do is find the person. It doesn't matter. It's not your problem what happens to them afterwards. Let the process be the process. And you can turn ordinary, decent people into genuine psychopaths. They will participate in genuine psychopathy because you made it part of the system. And that, unfortunately, is where a lot of police are. I agree that they're decent people as human beings, but the minute they're in that uniform and the minute they're in police mode, I'm sorry, they are psychopaths. And I do not trust them.
It's funny you say that, because I, too, am actually writing a book.
Ooh.
Thanks to my masters.
Do tell.
So, as you guys know, I'm doing my masters.
You heard it here first. I didn't even know about this.
No, this is something that I've been really passionate about for a while. I mean, as a photographer, my whole job is observation. And that I've explained this before about the vulnerability exchange between the photographer and the subject. And as soon as my lens is on someone, I see that shift. And I'm also very perceptive. And, there's a little part of me.
You are particularly good at this. The first time we actually met was when you did a photo shoot with my entire family. And you were so good and so relaxed about it that I had doubts in my mind that your work was going to be any good, because I'm like, she's way too relaxed. She's moving on too quick. I'm not convinced that this is. And then I sneakily went around behind you while you were photographing my wife by herself, And I saw what was happening in the lens. I was like, oh, damn, she's that good that she makes it look effortless. Yeah. So it's not just you that says you're good at this. You are damn good at this.
Thank you. I think it's less about the technical side. It's much more about the observation.
Yeah. But also that rapport and the vulnerability going both ways is something you're particularly good at.
And I originally started my master's doing on beauty standards. And it's because I have this fascination and also this gross like manipulation that I'm also caught up in with social media. I love it and I hate it all at the same time. And as someone who photographs predominantly women for a living, I can tell you now, I get dumped on. I don't like this about myself. And at the end of the day, it's just this like energy exchange. And so I was thinking about writing a book talking about perception and projection and our inability to show up in the real world anymore because our whole ego is tied up in the digital world. And this has now become what my thesis is around. Yeah. And so, I really want to write a book on how Jordan Peterson talks about the zebra, the zebra who doesn't want to stand on the outside of the pack, right?
Yes.
And that's exactly where we are in so many things. And I think it's so unique to Australia as well because we have tall poppy here, where people may feel it internally, but they're unwilling to express it externally because they fear retribution. And I've said this before, we have a self-esteem crisis in this country, and I'd argue worldwide. And I think that's by design. But anyway, so...
Can I say, yes, so book, I look forward to seeing it. And the cover design, I'm sure, will be amazing.
That's all it is, just a cover and some empty pages.
That's right. It'll be a low-content book. But also, on this issue of the tall poppy syndrome, one of the things that has really begun to strike me in the last... month and a half since I just started pushing out content and just being a full-time content creator, I am blessed with an amazing amount of vocal support from Australians. And I don't know if this is just something that I haven't noticed before. I mean, I have noticed it. I've enjoyed, people have appreciated my work and expressed their appreciation now for years, but there's this outpouring of it.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if that's another sign of the breaking of wokeness.
Yes.
That even Australians with our tall poppy syndrome, we're beginning to allow ourselves to celebrate quality and achievement and people stepping up and standing out. I don't know.
I actually said this, I think I said this on last week's podcast as well. There's so much I talked about when you weren't here. You'd be surprised.
You have such a good time without me.
I kept that going for 53 minutes. Wow. I could talk on my own.
Yeah, wow.
But no, I was saying this about our trolls and stuff. I'm like, I actually appreciate them because if they're putting in their time to watch us from beginning to end, particularly...
And some of them are.
I've called him Jim. I actually don't know if his name's Jim. I asked you last week, but I don't think you watch my channel, so you should. But I'm calling him Jim. But he commentates, he's hating, but he commentates on the whole video.
All the way through, yeah.
And but hang on a minute, I actually really respect that. I appreciate someone's willing to sit there and watch us for 2 hours.
He's not a low effort troll. He's actually putting the work in.
And you can disagree with me, but I honestly, hats off to you, and I appreciate that people are willing to do that. And I think that's a big part of what we need to see. We need to see people willing to engage in those discussions. I'm not always right. God, no. I'm mostly right.
Yeah, sometimes you disagree with me.
Yeah.
So,
I actually did it on X, and then I messaged you afterwards. I'm like, I've just disagreed with you on X. I'm sorry.
It's fine. You do not have to apologise for disagreeing.
Because I was angry.
But we do have to apologise for getting sidetracked again. So let's get back on track.
This is a quick one because nothing's actually happened, but the Epstein Client List. Kash Patel promises on day 1. We are now officially day 3 or going into day 3. Where is that list? Why the hell are they holding it back?
Okay, so this is a problem. I predicted that they would release it because I took Kash at his word. I have been wrong. Let me say this. I'm annoyed that they haven't released it, but there are defensible reasons why they may not have, and this is one of those things that we're just going to have to let play out a little bit. One of the biggest mistakes to make now would be to create a situation where the people are known but cannot be prosecuted. And that kind of a situation is, the American court system is particularly careful with this. If coverage creates a situation where you cannot find an unbiased jury, then it becomes impossible to try them because a fair trial is an essential tenet of any decent justice system, the American one included. So there is an argument to say we need to keep the names back until after we've actually, once they get arrested and prosecuted, well then of course we'll know what the names are. But we can't have everyone commentating and talking and everything else because then we won't be able to find a jury that hasn't been influenced already.
Could this potentially be kind of like the Diddy thing? What did they call it? I forget the American word for it, but like if you're going to have this massive legal battle, you need to make sure that when you press go, all the ducks are in a row, because if it's managed in the incorrect way, then it becomes no longer admissible in court.
Correct.
And then, you know, as like you said, if it's too much in the public, then the jury will,
you can't form a jury. So I'm going to say this.
Indictment, that was the word I was looking for.
So Trump has delivered brilliantly on so many things. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, that there are good and valid reasons why we haven't seen it yet. However, I won't give him the benefit of the doubt on the fact that he gave us the expectation that we were going to have it by now. That creates disappointment. That disappointment is real and it's legitimate, and I think that was a tactical error. I
think, this administration, I agree with so many things that they're doing, but if you've made that claim, like Patel was it's coming out day one.
Yeah.
If you haven't, just go, hey, I know I said this.
Yeah.
This is a snag we're hitting. And I get it, like, sensitive information, all that sort of stuff.
Pam Bondi saying, it's on my desk right now. Okay. Good.
Okay, well, give us one of them. Is one of the people on the list dead?
Yeah. Give us someone that can't be prosecuted anyway.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking is rumoured to be on there, which is bizarre. But anyway, if it's Stephen Hawking, the man's 6 foot under.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? But contrast to that, Mark Agnifilo, the lead attorney on P. Diddy's case, has quit. Spectacularly.
Fill me in on this, because this is your domain. This is the stuff that I don't follow as closely.
Well, I think it all ties really closely, because I'm going to tie it into another one of our favourite topics, OnlyFans, in a second.
Oh, yes. But my favourite topics.
This is a revolution against degeneracy. I honestly believe that. And, I never considered myself a prude, but by today's imagination, I am apparently like a Catholic nun.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
It's amazing you don't wear a pearl necklace so you can clutch it at every opportunity.
I thought I was quite, when I say liberal,
tolerant and live and let live.
Yeah, very open.
Yeah.
It turns out I'm just because what people are willing to put out on social media these days and say, I'm going off topic, but have you seen the woman who made death threats and called for assassination against Elon Musk, but then goes on to say that I haven't lodged my taxes for 8 years?
Yeah. You're like, what?
You're openly admitting a crime. The IRS is not an institution to go up against.
And of course, Elon Musk, it's not like he doesn't know who to call.
But you're literally telling people, hey, by the way, I break all the laws, but here's the evidence. I'm just... Yeah. But, anyway, so people are far too open about things. But the Diddy thing, I'm going to read it to you just so I don't get it wrong. But, so Mark Agnifilo, he's bailed on the case. He's facing a federal probe for racketeering, sex trafficking, and assault allegations.
Diddy is, not the lawyer.
Yeah. And they're piling up. So for anyone who hasn't been paying attention, there are so many small cases now where, Jane Doe this and that person this are all coming out and accusing Diddy of stuff. And the problem is most of them are civil. The one the grand indictment that's happening with Diddy at the moment is a federal lawsuit, right? And racketeering is a serious charge. It's very hard to prove. Sex trafficking, federal charge. But all of these civil ones are popping up where people are saying, I was a victim of Diddy.
So civil or state?
Civil.
Civil. Okay, civil. So then there is no criminal penalty. It would be a financial penalty.
And so people are now coming out, defending Diddy, saying these are people just coming out for a money grab.
And there may well be some of that.
And I definitely think there's some of that when it's someone like Diddy, who's a billionaire.
Yeah.
But also this is a criminal empire over almost 30 years.
Yes.
So I would say that there's a lot of truth to this. It's so messy and it's so gargantuan. It's really hard to get into the specifics on this. But one of his attorneys, Mark Agnifilo, is a huge attorney. He came out, he defended Diddy. He mostly came out and said that all these women that were coming forward were just, gold diggers, grifters, gold diggers, and all that sort of stuff. And he spectacularly quit on the day. He's like, I can no longer in good conscience do this. Which tells me he has seen something that is so indefensible that no amount of money, no amount of career potential upside can make him defend that man. Which leaves Diddy in a very precarious position, because who's he going to get? He's not going to accept some low, crappy attorney.
And it's a problem. Let me again put on my libertarian Asperger's kind of. Let's talk about the way that this functions, rather than getting caught up in the specifics of who it is. It is actually important for a legal system to function correctly for people to be willing to defend even the worst and most heinous people, because if they cannot get legal representation, then they cannot get a fair trial.
Yeah.
So there are some people that get mad. Oh, he took that case. He must be an evil person. Well, no, not necessarily, right? But there is also a reality that if I was a high-profile criminal attorney, unless I was just a soulless creature that had no morals at all, if I really did know that Diddy had done X, Y, or Z, I mean, it gets...
Did he do what he did?
Yeah. Did he do what he did? Yeah, Diddy did it. You very quickly get to the point where you're like, I can't stand up in court and say the things that I am obliged to say as your defence attorney.
Yeah.
So it is tricky. And again, just like not being able to find an unbiased jury, can you find a competent lawyer willing to take the case?
Yeah. And I think, like when you look at these things, you kind of look away from the noise and go, for a high-profile lawyer who's getting paid squillions of dollars for this.
And like, for example, the lawyer that defended, what's the guy, the famous guy driving away in a Bronco from the cops.
OJ.
Right?
Kardashian.
You make your career out of defending these high-profile cases.
And then we got stuck with Kim Kardashian.
Right, well, yeah. This is a career maker for him, so it is interesting for him to turn around and...
I just thought it was really interesting because, there's all this conversation around Diddy being a Fed, and I would agree that Diddy was a Fed. I think he was already this gross degenerate that got caught, and then they were like, actually, you're now an intelligence asset for us.
We're going to protect you because of what you're going to give us.
And we're going to turn a blind eye.
I think Epstein was a CIA asset, honestly.
Yeah, I think both of them were.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like... this is what I think, right? And this has come out just today. I don't know if you saw this. I'm going to forget his name. But there was a sitting congressman who was caught yesterday talking about Capitol Hill orgies, how he wants to cheat on his wife.
Yes.
Eric Swalwell.
Yeah.
Swalwell.
Yeah.
That's come out today. So when I talk about degeneracy, I think this is so bad, people don't even want to even acknowledge how bad it is. So what I think it is, you get someone who's like an AOC, right? Who's coming up the ranks and she wants to participate, she wants to be in it, and she goes there altruistically. I disagree with her, but I think she came in with it, like, with a bleeding heart.
She means it. She means what she says.
Yeah, I think, and I can accept anyone that has that, right? Yeah. And she's come into Capitol Hill, and then you get exposed to the corruption, the degeneracy, all the closed-doored conversations, and you realise you have to play the game if you want to go anywhere. And that's why you have lobbyists. That's why you have people who become, $200 million richer, like Pelosi,
whilst earning $200,000 a year,
right?
So it's amazing.
So I think when you start to see behind the curtain here, you have a choice. You either participate and you play the game, or you don't, and you become redundant. And I think, Diddy doing what he did and Epstein doing what he did, the government, whether it's CIA or whoever, emboldened those two because they were like, we need information on Clinton, we need information on Bush, we need information on these people.
Entrapment on celebrities and high-profile business people.
And you're seeing it with...
foreign dignitaries.
Not Epstein, what's his name? Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein. That case is coming back in, and Candace Owens is doing a deep dive, so I'm going to be invested in that. But essentially what it is it's degeneracy.
How is Macron's wife going at the moment?
It was explosive. Did I tell you how it ended?
Okay, sorry, I want to sidetrack you. Okay. Let's come back to that later.
Yeah. Okay, so essentially what we're looking at now is degeneracy has been exposed on so many different levels. Epstein, Diddy, Weinstein, and now the Macron thing actually ties into it, OnlyFans. I think what you're seeing now is like we abandoned our values collectively as a community across the board. The Western world abandoned our values, and we started looking at these different things, and I think that happens when you're in good times, right? What do they say? Good times create hard times and blah, blah, blah.
Good times create weak people create hard times, yeah.
And that's why we've seen the proliferation of OnlyFans and young women thinking that sex work is now an actual career choice. That
was originally a Hitler quote, by the way. So both of us are now confirmed Nazis.
Correct.
So can I comment on this? Because I'm politically libertarian, but personally conservative. And so what I don't want to see, if there is indeed a rejection of that kind of behaviour going on, I don't want to see it codified in law.
Yeah.
This is one of the funny, just this morning I got accused of being a Christian nationalist, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you just look at my work, right? Okay.
They're my favourite comments. Those ad hominem attacks, like you're controlled opposition, you're a Nazi, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, dude, try a little bit harder.
Yeah, just be more creative.
Remember when we were ASIO agents because we went to ARC?
Yes, correct.
That was my favourite.
Correct. And you know what? I still haven't received a paycheck from them.
Do you know what?
I am most annoyed.
Sorry, I've totally corrupted your conversation, but my favourite thing about that's actually the ultimate compliment, right? Like, so you and I are ASIO agents, and I just so happen to also be a bomb-ass photographer doing the masters.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a polymath.
Apparently I have so much free time.
So much talent, yeah. Where was I?
You were going, people are accusing you of being a Christian nationalist.
Okay, yes, and so what I don't want to see is, if there is a cultural rejection of degeneracy going on, I don't want to see that being codified in law. But people make the mistake of saying, oh, well, you're a libertarian, so you shouldn't disagree with anyone's behaviour. You shouldn't participate in a boycott campaign of Target because they've got transgender stuff for kids or whatever it might be, right? It's like, no. I am allowed to use the power of my money, my feet, vote with my feet, my freedom of association to influence others and to reward or not reward behaviour as I see fit. That's an entirely separate thing to the laws that I want to have written and the use of police to enforce something.
Yeah.
So if we are actually in a moment where there is a cultural movement going on, well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I will be still, though, watching and making sure, and again, this is that Asperger's thing. It's like, yeah, cultural movement, do your thing, but don't try and write laws on this.
My biggest thing with laws is that it's so overly complicated. Like, make it simple. Law 1 to 20. These are the laws. Everyone should know what they are. And then all this, like, crappy, like, legal nonsense and nuance that you and I would never understand. Like, I had no idea about the law about you can't bring a judge into disrepute. Like, this is the problem. Our justice system, our legislation is so complicated that you and I will never understand it.
You must have read my book because you keep on talking about things in my book. No, but I would argue that it is inherently unjust to have a system of law where it is not possible for one adult to know it all.
Yeah.
Even lawyers who spend their entire lives in the law, they have to specialise. They can't be generalist. And yet at the same time to have a system that says ignorance is no excuse. Ignorance is inevitable. You cannot not be ignorant, and yet it's no excuse under the law. The minute you reach that level of that number of laws where ignorance is inevitable, and yet it's not an excuse, you've created an immoral system. And it's no longer about the laws themselves being immoral, it's about the system becoming immoral by the sheer scale of it.
Well, I'll give you an example. I travelled extensively with my family, and we went to Switzerland, and me, my brother, and my dad all got a Swiss Army knife. It's old now; it's like 30 years old. But we got like the daddy one, the brother one, and the little one, right? And I still have it, and I actually use it all the time. I use it like the blade to like slice open all my Amazon parcels that I buy a lot. Things like that, scissors, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I did not know this. I actually can't legally carry that in Victoria. I had no idea. It's in my gear bag. That's what I was saying
before about the Leatherman.
Yeah.
Right? Like
but
when
my Swiss Army knife's this big.
Yeah, I know. My Leatherman's not much bigger.
And it's in my kit, and it's also got like a flathead screwdriver on it and a Phillips head. And I use it, so at the bottom, long story, but at the bottom of my camera when I put the tripod plate in there, it's so tight I can't relax it. So I use a flathead to get it undone. I did not know I'm not allowed to carry that in Victoria.
Yeah, it's absurd. It's so absurd. Now, I don't know the current laws, but I would have thought you would have a lawful excuse because it is a part of your work. But the very fact that you might have to make that argument with a police officer who wants to,
But when you talk about ignorance, like it wasn't until the other day because I was like looking into the laws because someone was like, oh, how can you defend yourself? And I watched this guy. This is a tangent, but I'm just explaining my ignorance here. There's a guy I watch in America, Peter McKinnon. He's a really well-known YouTuber photographer, and his whole thing, he loves switchblades or like pocket knives and whatever. And he always does these cool little tricks with it. And he's Canadian, right? And he's always got a knife, and he does this thing called everyday carry as a Canadian. His wallet, his knife for the day, and his phone, whatever. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I could buy a knife. Like I don't know if you call it a switchblade or whatever it's called. But I was like, no, you can't. I was like, really?
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Even now to the point that, so a knife that's designed for stabbing, which you might use in a hunting type situation or certain other types of work, they'll have a blade all the way down one side and a blade 1/3 of the way down the other side. I don't believe even that's legal anymore. There's the length of the blade restrictions and all kinds of other stuff. And I get it. I don't want people walking down the street with a machete either. But that's a crime problem. Making knives illegal specifically is now just making it double illegal.
Well, this is the same thing like with gun laws. Like, the law-abiding citizen can't have the gun, but the criminal can. The criminal's always going to find the gun.
Yeah. Did you read my post on X about Gen X? Do you identify as Gen X?
No, I'm a millennial.
Okay, all right, sorry.
You're the grumpy
I'm
brothers.
the grumpy. Well, technically I'm a Zennial, but
Because what are you, 82?
I'm 82, so I'm right on that cutoff.
Yeah, you and G are the same.
I am more of a Zennial than I am a Gen X, but I'm comfortable with the Gen X because my older brother's a Gen X.
Gen X is like what's that? That American movie? God, it's gonna kill me. At the end, he's like puts his arm up like that. It's like the quintessential 80s coming of age movie. God, what's it called? It'll come to me. That's Gen X is known to be the ones who like have a fisticuff and the next minute they're having a beer.
Yeah.
They fall over on the ground and just crush all their knees up and not care.
All right, so I'm going to read you this post.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to read you this post from X because I think it's relevant here when we're talking about all this sort of stuff and how.
I think it's important to know your generation too, by the way.
I think it helps.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where, okay, you don't want to be defined by it, but I think it helps you to understand yourself.
Yeah.
And who you are a little bit more.
And also what the environment was when you were growing up.
All right. So here's my post. You should be following @Topherfield on all socials and...
Carl's J Soda.
On all socials. All right. Gen X is the fuck around find out generation, and we are witnessing the transition of power from the tired boomers to the fed up X's. Sure, Trump is a boomer, but look who he is appointing into positions of power. With few exceptions, it's Gen X. The defining characteristic of Gen X is that we just want to be left alone, do our thing, live and let live. But along came woke and told us that that was never going to happen. We couldn't live in peace. We had to kiss the ring. We told them one last time to leave us alone, and they said, "Or what, old man?" And now we're pissed. We were raised by the boomers who had never heard of helicopter parenting, and not only is our childhood not on the internet, for the most part it was not observed at all because there were no adults within earshot when shit went down. Get out of the house was usually the first words our parents would utter on a Saturday morning, and it was best for everybody if we didn't return until the streetlights came on that evening. There were no mobiles, no messenger apps, and we didn't know where we would find our friends, so we roamed the neighbourhood looking for a pile of BMXs in a friend's front yard. Heck, if there were enough bikes, we might even just roll up on a stranger's house and be like, "Can we join in?" We played with fireworks. If our parents didn't have guns, this is what triggered the memory, our neighbours did, and seeing people walk the streets with a rifle over their shoulder was no cause for alarm. We set things on fire. We climbed into and on top of places we weren't supposed to be. We broke ribs whilst engaging in risky and probably illegal activities, and then did our best to pretend that everything was fine for fear of what would happen to us if our parents knew what we'd been up to. Me personally, I've rafted a creek in full flood whilst wearing my only suit, complete with tie, after church. At 15, I rode a push bike from Melbourne to Ocean Grove along the old Geelong freeway back when there was no shoulder or margin for error, with trucks rumbling by. 2 days later, I rode back. I swam across jellyfish-filled lakes, nearly copped a high-speed Barocca tube to the face and a firecracker stunt gone wrong. I was held at gunpoint as a suspected IRA terrorist while I was travelling in Germany. Long story. I've had a toenail removed in a military hospital without the aid of anaesthetic. I've been in 3 car crashes and 4 motorcycle crashes, lost 4 friends and a cousin to the road toll, lost friends to suicide, and in more recent times I've stood my ground in the face of riot police, tear gas, police horses, threats of arrest, actual arrest and criminal charges, and very nearly rubber bullets. I no longer care what anyone says about me or thinks of me. That was bred out of me long ago. If I was going to cower in fear of what others think, I would have done it already. But I didn't, and I won't. And I'm not alone. What we're witnessing in the USA is what happens when Gen X takes over from the tired old boomer guard. With few exceptions, Trump is entrusting the future of the USA and through them the future of the free world to Gen X. Buckle up. We are the fuck around find out generation, and boomers and youngsters alike are about to find out.
That was really well written. It's funny you say that because I did say that post yesterday, and I wrote a Gen Y version.
Oh, did you?
Can I read it to you?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm still working on it, but I was like, it's so true. And like, there's a weird sense of pride that you have for your generation as well.
Yeah.
Like, you're my brother's age and Gareth's age.
Yeah.
I'm 86, so I'm right in your Gen Y. And, you know, foot in the digital world, foot in the analog world. We didn't have social media until the end. We didn't have mobile phones until the end. But I wrote this. I was like, Gen Y, we're the last generation to just miss the digital leash of childhood, but still tech savvy enough to navigate a world that changed faster than our dial-up connection. We grew up making mixtapes, burning CDs, and praying LimeWire or Kazaa didn't nuke the family computer. We had to memorize our mates' home phone numbers, take public transport without Google Maps, and actually go outside to be entertained. Those of us who got our Ps used to own a Melways, and you'd have that on your lap as you're learning to navigate a manual gear stick and drive through the city for the first time.
Yes.
Do you remember doing that? Having a manual car with your Melways and just being like, I got this.
So don't lose your place. But I snapped a clutch cable in a manual transmission car, and I had to navigate with the Melways whilst using the starter to get myself started from the lights, and then clutchless shift into second, just rev matching into second and third, and then back to a stop and stall the car at a stop again, just to be able to get home whilst navigating on a Melways on the passenger seat.
I remember, like, you get to the edge, and it'd be like, go to D19, and you'd be like driving, you're like...
And it's at the other end of the Melways, because we lived at a boundary where all the started the maps here, and then ages later, like the numbers like 150 later, they go up here, and you're like, come on.
And the book was this big. And don't forget, we were and then also the yellow pages, you got 2 of them, and they were each this thick. Anyway.
Yeah, and then there was the white pages as well. So depending on whether you wanted to search by category or you actually knew the name and you wanted to search alphabetically.
Yeah. Lol.
Oh my
so
goodness.
It goes on. I say, we were sold the dream. Go to uni, get a degree, and the world is yours. Instead, we got skyrocketing house prices, casualised workforces, and the privilege of being called lazy by the same people who bought their first home with a single income and a handshake. Yet here we are, adaptable, self-reliant, and hustling harder than ever. We're the bridge between the old world and the new, the last generation who remembers life before the internet but mastered it anyway. We're not perfect, but we're the generation that knows how to work hard and log off, even if it's just for a few hours. No participation trophies needed. We earned our resilience the old-fashioned way by failing, adapting, and trying again.
Nice. I like. Yeah, well done.
I actually really enjoy writing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, that's good.
I enjoy it.
That's great. So we're about to lose battery, but while I'm pointing at that camera, tell us in the comments what you think. Which is better? Gen X? Come on, I'm better.
Gen Y, obviously.
Gen X, I'm better.
Well, let's change the batteries and we'll come back.
Sounds good.
We're back.
We're back, everybody.
We're back, and we're talking about how awesome Gen Y is.
Look, I have a slightly different recollection of that conversation, but I'm also a Gen X where I'm just like, yeah, okay, fine, you do you.
Well, you're the silent.
I just don't care.
You're the generation everyone forgets anyway.
Well, yes and no. I've discovered recently that we're actually called the terrifying generation online, and I think it's because of the silence, and it's because.
It's like never underestimate the silent ones.
Yeah, correct, and it's that old thing of, it's the bloke that sat there and took it as you insulted him and, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Who finally just goes, fuck this, and gets up.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're like, oh, shit, what's about to happen? And I think that's the Gen X thing that's happening right now. We trusted the boomers to run the world, and look, we've benefited enormously from the world as it is now. It's an amazing place. But also they've fucked some things up. And then we've let the kids go and do their thing and have all their weird identities and do all that nonsense. But we just wanted to be left alone through it all, and you bloody well wouldn't.
Yeah, you poked the bear.
And now we're like, fuck this, and we've stood up out of the couch.
Do you know what? This was, again, last week's podcast, but I thought it was really funny. I was driving down in Bayside, and it was like, I think it was like 10:30, so everyone else's work, it's during the week, and I was on my way to an appointment, and riding down the road was like this collective of boomers with their helmets on, riding their cycles and wearing Zoe Daniels t-shirts. And I was like, is there any better postcard photo to summarise the champagne socialists, like the boomers, campaigning whilst everyone else is at work?
Okay, so on teals, I'm going to be posting this on my socials later. Can anyone name for me, because the teal, the reason they've picked the colour teal is because it's meant to be the combination of the Greens with blue, the Liberals, right? So they were trying to outflank the Liberals and basically be, well, we're like the Liberals, but we're the Liberals that care about the environment.
Yeah.
And so they're targeting Liberal seats and trying to take votes off Liberals. Can anyone name for me a policy position that the teals have which the Greens don't also have?
No.
I don't think there is one.
I've looked. Greens.
And I'm like, where's the blue in this teal colour? I can't find, not that I'm defending the Liberals, anyone that watches my work, I'm not a fan of the Liberals, but I cannot find the difference.
Well, you know that because Monique Ryan, good old Mon from Kooyong, wear your masks, and Zoe Daniels have come out like upholding the trans rights matter and all this nonsense. I'm like, you guys aren't getting the temperature. No.
Like this is not. And you're not teals. Like at that point, you're not somewhere in between Greens and Liberals.
Yeah.
And also, Simon Holmes at Court has come out and said that basically Teals are going to work with Labor if there's a minority government situation. The Teals will work with Labor. It's like, well, again, I'm not seeing the blue in your Teals branding.
No, it's
here.
bullshit. It's just a complete psyop. Yeah. But we need to go back to the Degeneracy, and again, we're going to talk about my favourite subject. OnlyFans.
Yes,
OnlyFans.
Of course.
The reason
we can't have an episode without talking about OnlyFans.
The reason we need to talk about this, and I covered it last week, is that Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue, those two girls who are
two names that I didn't need to know about, and I just wish I could never hear again. But honestly,
sorry.
It just is this is like one of the layers of hell. Like I'm in Dante's Inferno at this point.
You're getting into the belly of the beast now. But the reason I bring it up is these two are in some kind of like competition to degenerate each other. So last week they both kind of announced or scared people thinking they were pregnant, right? One's like, oh, I'm pregnant, and the other one shows a belly and stuff. And it turns out that Bonnie Blue, the one that slept with 1,000 men, she's the borderline pedophile, I would argue, because she sleeps with the barely legals. She came out and said, of course I made it up. I'm trying to get some money to pay for someone's IVF. I'm like, honey, you keep bragging about all these millions that you're making. If you need to then do some kind of weird internet clout chasing campaign to make a little bit more money to pay for someone's IVF, either you're not making as much money as you say, but I dare say she's making a lot of money, or B, you're just literally a vacuous clout chasing mongrel.
In the past, there wouldn't have been an avenue for someone like that. The social media, wasn't available. They would have gone and social climbed and tried to, and just gone and been a gold digger like a normal, psychopath. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, I'm a big fan of social media. I'm a big fan of the internet and what the digital world allows us to do from a productivity point of view, the quality of life that it enables, the communication, the relationship, etc. Fantastic. But I would be willing to burn it all down right now if I could just never hear either of those names again.
I just really think you can't go much lower. It's like a new low for social clout. And it matters for a couple of reasons because, again, the Bleeding Hearts have come out defending Bonnie and Lily for being able to do what they do, right? Like Gen Z are so progressive that they genuinely believe that sex work is real work. And they've come out to defend their honour. But now, Gen Z is growing up. People still think Gen Z are young. No. They're in their 20s. Mm-hmm. And some of them are just coming up on their 30s because most millennials are 40 now. Mm-hmm. That hurt to say. Sorry, I'm going to need a minute. No. But so the Gen Zs are now getting to the point of either settling down, buying a house, having children. And they've come out and going, hang on a minute, you guys are making a mockery of pregnancy when so many, because, you have to out, what's the word I'm going to look for here?
Virtue signal.
Mm-hmm. So now the girls who were defending them are now coming out saying, hang on a minute, you're making fun of people who are going through IVF, who can't get pregnant.
All these people who can't get pregnant, you're doing this, yeah.
Right.
Which I don't buy into that outrage stuff either.
No, but now what I'm saying is it's a splitting of the people, so their fans are turning on them now.
What's really interesting to me is that the Gen Y mob are the ones that I think are going to be the worst impacted by the movement of wokeness.
Gen Y?
Or
is that Gen Z? Gen Y is millennials.
Okay, no, so yeah, just a bit younger. So the younger millennials and Gen Y are the ones that are going to be smashed to the heart. Gen Z, thank you. Yes, you're right.
We need to get this right.
Yeah. Are going to be smashed the hardest because they grew up with it and they were told this is the direction the world is going in and this is the direction the world will continue to go in. This is the future. The boomers are going to die out. Everyone else is going to die out and you're going to carry the world on in this direction. Of course, that wasn't true. And even if you look at Gen Alpha, they're increasingly rejecting. I mean, Gen Alpha is kind of splitting. There are people that are going all in on the woke nonsense, and then there's everyone else looking at them going, you're nuts, and we don't want to be like you at all. And they're looking at their parents and their grandparents and saying, we don't want to be any of you. This sexual revolution thing sucks. This the whole direction that our culture is gone in sucks. We want the old. And we're seeing that in lots of different ways. But that leaves this sandwiched kind of generation, your Gen Z and your younger millennials, that were raised with this. They've already made crucial life decisions. They've already bet the farm on this being the future, and it's going to be very costly to them to bail out now.
I agree with you, and I've actually said this so often for the last few years with the woke movement, and I honestly do have deep sympathy for them because, empathy I should say, because their formative years, their teenage years to their early 20s, all of their decisions went in on wokeness. And that's when you and I are figuring out what we want to do when we're older, where are we going to go to uni and all that sort of stuff. And they've gone and got degrees in useless things that aren't tangible skills. And so they're coming out into the workforce realizing that it's being rejected. There's no position for you here. And that behavior, that entitlement that everyone told you that, you know, you can go home for a mental health day and you can call in sick and we have to appreciate your feelings. The real world, or I guess, for lack of a better expression, fuck around, find out, tells you that's not the case. And they're being hit with a hammer of reality right now, and it's splitting them open. And the problem is, they have to then they've got two choices, double down and become unemployable and then become another strain on social security or, entitlements from the government, or go and relearn and put yourself back. And you are starting from behind the starting line. And their whole thing was about equity. And
they are going to end up having to compete with people 10 years younger than them who don't have the conflict of having to unlearn all of the nonsense and all of the entitlement.
And who are hungry.
Gen Alpha is getting married younger. They're planning to have more kids. They're planning to get married younger. They're planning to have more kids. They're going and getting trades and just getting practical real-world skills. and generally have a better attitude and a better work ethic. And Gen Z is going to have to compete with them in the marketplace as someone who's 10 years older, but actually not 10 years wiser.
Yeah, I actually think you're going to see like a resurgence of apprenticeships for this Gen Z. For those who are inclined to try and shift their position, and you're going to be seeing like this mature age apprentices, and having to go and like you think about like your first job. Like my first job was Macca's, and that was back when they worked so hard to raise you as this really good employee. That doesn't even exist anymore at Macca's. So you're going to take these Gen Z kids who are in their late 20s and they're going to have to go back to that.
Yeah. McDonald's, when I was a kid, if you could get into McDonald's, learn as much as you could, be a sponge, and then get into their management traineeship stuff.
It was brilliant.
Like, that's better than a university degree.
It was the cornerstone, and it was one of those things that, like, all employers were like, oh, wow, you worked at Macca's. Wow,
correct.
Cool.
If you could survive in Macca's and you were good enough to get into their management training course and then to graduate from that, you would get snapped up.
I will say, I loved my job at Macca's. I worked there for 4 years, from 14 and 9 months until I was 18. I loved it.
So I lied about my age to start working full-time at Pizza Hut.
Oh, yeah. I used to love Pizza Hut.
Yeah, it was my first full-time job. And then, so I lied, and then they noticed that I'd lied and decided not to notice. And the ATO didn't ask too many questions either, which was good. So I went through, so I sat down with their big booklet, and I was homeschooled. And so I was told, read that. So I sat and I read it. And I can read relatively quickly, and it's all relatively straightforward stuff, and I read it through. And then I went back to the manager and said, okay, I've finished that. What else do you want me to do? And she was like, oh, well, you're supposed to take the rest of the day to read that. You're supposed to be out of my hair now for the rest of the day. Anyway, very soon they had me coming into the store at 7 o'clock in the morning to open it up, make all the dough, get everything ready for the day. There was not another employee in the place until 10 o'clock, and then we opened at 11:30 for the lunch thing. And I was doing that 4 days a week. And I'd work 4 8-hour shifts a week. And I was doing that at 13. I hadn't had my 14th birthday yet.
Yeah.
Right, at that point in time. That's what growing up is to me.
Yeah.
Right, that's what being useful is, and getting a job and learning life skills. That's what that is to me.
I remember that feeling of getting employed. And my friend at the time, I was about to turn 14 in 9 months, right? And I'd done work for my auntie prior to that, and I'd get like school holiday work or whatever. But this was my first proper job, and my friend encouraged me to go put a resume in at Sunbury McDonald's, and I did, and I got the job. And this like sense of pride to feel employed, right? And then I think I was getting paid, God, it was like $18.19 or so, $8.09, sorry, $8.09, not 18. And I remember getting my first paycheck, and it was like $67 or something like that, and just being like,
this is so much money.
And then so I would have got my job, what, year 9-ish or year 10, I can't remember, somewhere there, and had it all through high school. And every week I earned some, because I used to do drive-through, which was the job to have, because all the people eaters, you know what I'm saying?
No, but I don't think I want to.
If you were hot, you got a free bag of cookies.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I stole cookies. But anyway, so, you know, and I'd finish school, walk to McDonald's, work at Macca's, and I'd work from like 4 till 9 o'clock at night. My dad would pick me up, I'd go home, and then I'd do my homework. So it was a lot, but I was earning, I think, somewhere between like $100 to $200 a week, $200 on a good week.
Yeah.
And then I did the children's parties. So on Saturday morning, I would start at 8:30, and I have to get ready for my first party at 9, and then my last party I'd do 3 in a day, and I'd be finished at like 4 or 5.
It's just hell. That's hell on earth.
I loved it.
Oh, gosh.
Like when you're young,
you and
kids
me are
fun.
not the same.
Yeah.
You and me are not the same.
You know, they get their 3 nuggets and their chips and little Cokes, and then they'd run around, and then you play some games, and it was, Anyway, but the point is, like, that sense of pride I had about having a job and being able to, like, then be, like, you know, I wanted a pair of Oakleys, or I wanted a Rip Curl backpack, and my mum couldn't say no, it was my money.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And that, so to bring it back to the actual point, for Gen Z, they bought into the whole finish high school, get good grades,
mummy
go
and
to
daddy will pay for
university, blah,
everything.
blah, blah. They graduate from university at 26, having many of them not had a job. Now, there are plenty of exceptions, and if you're one of the exceptions and you're about to go, in the comments, just relax. We know that you exist. But as a generation, by and large, they graduated from university at 24, 25, 26 years of age with no real-world relevant experience and a degree that has no real-world relevance either.
Yeah.
They are a lost generation.
Yeah, I genuinely feel sympathy for that, because I can't even imagine, like, and the whole trans thing too, like, I'm cautious about talking about this, because I do think that there is that whole There's definitely trans people, as in the sense that, like, you know, your brain's programmed a different way. And I can't even imagine what that's like. And I have nothing but utmost respect and consideration for people who genuinely were born that way, right? But this social contagion of trans, I don't have any time for. This whole, like, I identify as a cat or they, them, it, all of that nonsense, zero time. But what about if your parents enabled you when you were 4 and you decided that you're a girl when you were a boy, or other way around, and your parents signed the paperwork so that you could get a double mastectomy at 14, and you've been on puberty blockers, and then you basically reproductively, like, you're barren. You no longer have your breasts, and all of a sudden you grow out of this ideology. And we're seeing it now. Like, this is going to be the thalidomide and, like, the Nuremberg trials. Like, I can't even imagine what this is going to be. But in 10 years' time, mark my words, this will be some kind of cataclysmic, like, class action.
And like you, I have enormous, sympathy is just such a small word for this. These kids are victims of abuse. There isn't.
I've said it before. This is eugenics.
Yeah.
This is eugenics just repackaged.
And it literally is in this sense. And I would say that this is part of the culture of death, which once you reject God, those that hate me, those that hate God, love death. It is in the Proverbs, and we have a culture of death now where when it comes to euthanasia for you know, are you a bit sad? Are you old? Are you a bit tired? We can just kill you. It's fine. The UK, Canada, etc. really pursuing that quite aggressively. Now younger people, you're depressed. You've got a chronic condition. Whatever. You know. Well, you know, death is an option. Have you tried death? We'll just give you a little dose of death and see if you like it. But then also when it comes to abortion, very, very sensitive topic. But in my opinion, that is a form of child sacrifice. We're saying to people, instead of saying, if you sacrifice this baby to Moloch, you'll get a better harvest. It's like, well, if we just terminate your pregnancy, you'll get a better degree. You'll get a better education, okay?
You can get a pay rise.
Now, again, I'm all for supporting women with unwanted pregnancies. We should be getting around them and supporting them, not leaving them in the lurch. So there's a lot of work to do there. But again, this sort of culture of viewing death as a solution. And transgenderism is the same. It doesn't kill the person who has the surgery, but it ends their bloodline. It is a eugenic movement.
It is. And it's one of those things, like, I don't want to be right about this either. I feel genuinely sad for these people. But I think we're going to see that. But I'm going to move on to the next topic because it kind of ties into what we're doing, because this woman is, you know, at the cornerstone of the progressive movement in Australia. Albanese has gone on...
He's not a woman.
He's not.
You just said this woman's at the cornerstone of the progressive movement in Australia. Albanese. I hate to break it to you. I know we were just discussing transgenderism, but...
No, Anthony Albanese was on Abby Chatfield's podcast. The woman...
good Lord.
Most known and most infamous for saying she eats ass on camera, and was the crazy vaccine pedal pusher during COVID. Anthony Albanese has gone on her podcast where the week before, the podcasts were about dirty blowjobs.
Classy.
Yeah.
So I had the misfortune of seeing part of this.
Oh, God. I couldn't. I just saw the screenshot. That was enough.
And so people who watch our podcast, we read your comments and we see your comments, and we appreciate the huge amounts of positive feedback. And we get a lot of feedback around just the authenticity of it and the fact that we're actually just two good mates having a chat.
Yeah.
I have never, and I mean that word literally, it has never happened before where I have seen part of a podcast and it has felt so fake.
Yeah.
The level of inauthenticity.
Yeah.
Abby was probably very excited to have the Prime Minister and super blah, 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 and probably fangirling a little bit, etc. Super fake, super contrived. And Albanese was like nails on a chalkboard. I got maybe 15 to 20 seconds before I had to bail because I could not deal. This
is the thing about podcasts. I hope there's more liberal, and I mean liberal in the American sense, and progressive podcasts, because, you know, mainstream media shouldn't hold the monopoly on conversation and discourse. I hope more people do it. But the reason Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, or any of Tim Pool or Bongino, the reason those right-leaning podcasts became successful, Joe Rogan wasn't even right-leaning. No. He was abandoned by left. Yep. Is because it's literally this. It's just a conversation where you're not trying to be pretentious. You're not trying to intellectually flex. Yep. You're not trying to like coerce someone or shame them. You're just having a yarn.
And it's authentic. That word is super, super important in all of this. What's the old saying? Once you learn how to fake authenticity, you've got it made.
Yeah.
Authenticity is what people are craving now, and you can't fake it. It's not something that you can fake. But the thing with a podcast, when you see someone on a podcast, you know that they mean what they say. It doesn't mean that you think they're right, doesn't mean that you agree with them, but you know that they mean what they say. This isn't the product of PR.
Yeah.
Now, that's an instant problem when it's a politician on the podcast, because you know that it's not authentic necessarily. And then when it just has that super sugary, syrupy, sweet, contrived feeling that one did, I just could not.
Yeah. It's just.
And if that's the best he can do, if that's his pivot to try and attract the younger generation, etc., good luck to him.
But what kind of annoyed me more so is just like the literal replication, right? So Trump does Rogan, Kamala does Call Her Daddy, Albanese does Abby Chatfield. You're just like...
Is that the best we've got,
have
really?
Have you got no original thought? The reason Trump went on Rogan is because they knew they were going to have a completely unedited, from zero to the end, just unfiltered conversation. And Rogan wasn't just going to go in there and interrogate Trump. They were just going to have a yarn. And Kamala wasn't willing to do that. She went on Call Her Daddy. It was scripted. It was pre-recorded and it was edited.
Yep.
Same with Abby Chatfield. You can tell because she was reading out the questions and they didn't sound like her.
They were all pre-vetted. And I mean, the beauty of something like a Rogan is it goes for 3 hours, which means you get past all the scripted stuff. You can't prepare for a 3-hour interview. You can't prepare for every topic that's going to come up. It's just not possible.
And if you're in there with a script, you can't talk for 3 hours. No. You run out of things to say and you go off channel.
Now, I've just had a little epiphany here. I've just realised, because this podcast looks like it's going to end up being 3 hours. And you don't care because you're not editing it anymore. You're like, I have offloaded the editing. We will go for days. Yeah, you are so much more evil than I give you credit for.
You have to because you know how to actually edit. This is the thing I want to learn, how to add effects and stuff. Because now I just want you to whoa. No. This is what happens though. Like on a podcast, if you're listening to a podcast, you kind of feel like you're in the room. Yeah. Particularly if there's good chemistry between the two people. Like the last thing you want to go is watch a 60-minute style interview where it's an interrogation. Like, what do you feel about this?
Can you imagine you have an invitation to an exclusive interview room. You get to sit there and watch people be interviewed for their first job. Like how painful that viewing experience would be.
And this is the other thing too. Like when you are doing a 2-3 hour podcast, you're getting to see people's mannerisms, the way they speak, and it's their language. It's colloquial. It's not like, as I said, back here, over here, because who can be bothered? I love Jordan Peterson, I love Douglas Murray, but listening to them for 3 hours on a podcast, probably not.
Gosh. Yes, and their mannerisms for me ultimately become a little bit annoying.
Do you remember?
Don't tell them I said that.
Do you remember when we were after ARC, right, guys? I'll tell you this story. So we went to ARC, not last year, the year before. God, time's flying.
Yeah.
And it was an intense conference, and because it was their first one, they were trying to intellectually flex, definitely. And there were some very academic people in there, as Jordan is, and there was a lot of Harvard-esque, Oxford-esque kind of things that I was like, it's a bit pretentious. Come on, it was. They had a strings...
But it is British high society.
It was very, very posh. They had, all these people who were very good at their strings instruments, and there was everything.
The orchestra was lovely.
It was beautiful, but it was just like I don't go to many of those kind of functions. Very highbrow. It was. It was.
Yes.
But the person.
For us commoners from the Antipodes.
Us bogans. I often get accused of being a bogan, to which I say, yes, I am. I grew up in Sunbury, guys. What do you expect?
I don't get accused of being a bogan, which is why I'm better than you.
That's all right. I like my Westie roots. I still wear my Ugg boots. I'm not above Macca's.
I'm from the northern suburbs, which is no better than a Westie.
You're a socialist.
I hide it well.
But on my point on that, so I remember watching all of those talks because I was doing the photography. But the person I loved the most was the priest. And the reason I loved the priest, he was a Catholic priest. What was his name?
I didn't see a single session because I was in the foyer.
That's right.
Interviewing people.
He was amazing. I can't for the life of me. He was just chatting to you.
Yeah.
He was just talking like this. And I remember I was just absolutely enthralled by what he was saying. And I was like, he was the best speaker to me because he wasn't trying to intellectually flex. And, then we went, so it was like 3 days, ARC was, wasn't it? 3 full days?
Yeah.
And we were all spent. We were exhausted. And then we had we got invited to Jordan Peterson's show the next day.
Mm-hmm. Which was like a stadium show at the O2.
It was a big stadium show at the O2. It was massive, and it was him and God love him, Ben Shapiro, and we were all just sitting there like this. Like,
oh, yeah, that hurt. That hurt. No disrespect to either of them, but given the state that we were in after 3 days of
too much
work,
academia. It was just... and then he was talking about crime and punishment. And I can't even say his name, Dostoevsky. Yeah. And I have got that book, and I promised myself I'd read it, and I can't. Yeah. It's just like...
So I don't know how we got to this particular topic, but I'm pretty sure it's not in our notes.
No, it's not.
So let's come back.
So another topic I kind of touched on last week because it broke when we were doing the podcast was the New South Wales nurses. They have now been charged. One of them has now been charged. I don't believe both. Yeah. So one of them has now been charged, which is fine. Look, I think this is one of those ones we don't need to go too deep on. Threatening to kill people and claiming that you have already killed people is not a protected free speech issue. You are now causing other people to live in legitimate fear of their own right to freedom and right to life and liberty and happiness. And there's a price to pay for that. I think they're a symptom of how politically polarised we are too, though, because you're seeing this in America as well, where they're calling for assassinations, and there have been actual assassination attempts. Yeah. People are now at the point where they're so comfortable to ask for death. Yeah, or to call for death. So the other issue with these nurses is the people jumping on up and down, going, "Oh, it was a setup. It was a psyop." That just annoys me. Stuff. It's just like, guys, not everything's a psyop. There are idiots in the world that actually do stuff that really is actually that stupid. Well, there's idiots in the world who are emboldened enough to think that there's no consequence for their actions, right? Yeah. And I think that's what happens when, for example, the youth crime stuff, they know that they can get away with it, so they do it. Yeah. And if these guys are on a video, I read a little bit about it, but they entered this chat room, whatever, and they probably felt emboldened to say what they wanted to say, and they thought that would be the end of it, not realising it would be the storm it was. But to that, so obviously you've got the Muslim community who did not come out and condemn it. And this is the point I made last week, was that I have a lot of Muslim friends, and I have had nothing but great memories from my time in the Middle East. No issue with their religion. But if you want to stop Islamophobia, we saw this when 9/11 happened. People instantly, all Muslims are terrorists, right? And I don't agree with that statement. However, we are now seeing it again where the Muslim community is failing to condemn their extremists. And what that is breeding is contempt for Muslims in general. Right? And we're seeing that with the Palestine thing, the Gaza thing, And then we had Senator Payman coming out defending Iran. What is going on? So cast your mind back to 9/11, because you'd be old enough to remember that. I was 14 when it happened, yeah. I remember that morning very vividly. And images within a day or two, and of course the internet didn't exist in the same way that it does now, and we didn't have access to information in the way that we do now. But images and video very quickly came out from the Middle East where spontaneous street parties broke out because thousands of Americans had been killed. And there was a sense in which, yes, but that's over there. Fast forward to October 7th last year, and the attack on last year before, and the attack into Israel, and the kidnappings and the rapings and the murders and everything else. The street parties broke out in Western cities. Yeah. In Australia. Yeah. In the UK. In the US. At the Opera House. At the Opera House. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not going to tar every Muslim with that brush. In fact, I'm going to say it's only a minority of them. But if the mainstream Muslim world are not willing to ostracize those people, then we don't know where the line is. We don't know who's who. Well, I never thought I'd say this because I was so critical of Saudi Arabia for a really long time. And now Saudi, and I don't want to get this right, I think it's the Emirates, I think it's the UAE, have come out now realising that, because they're both trying to make it post-oil world, right? Saudi and UAE are really trying to build infrastructure. They're opening the Western world. Saudi's opened up to tourism now. And I think they've identified that they need to not westernise, but modernise. Open up. Right? Open up. And Saudi have now come out saying that we need to condemn this fundamentalist extremist Muslim movement because it's not helping us. Correct. And they're absolutely right. Yeah, so that conversation's happening now, and Saudi are enemies of Iran, and I think you're seeing that now. So it's really interesting to me because, like, again, it's the bleeding hearts who've come out and supported Gaza and Palestine. You know, no one should die. I get it, all that sort of stuff. But now you're saying that someone who's wearing hijab can openly state on social media that people should die, and you don't seem to think that's a problem.
Just because they have a particular genetic background.
Yeah, you are the problem.
So I'm aware of some of the de-radicalisation efforts that go on in Victoria, not in detail, but I'm aware of some of the information around them. And one of the things that's very, very clear is that there are imams who, behind the scenes and when working directly with the people who the government are concerned about being radicalised, etc., are really fantastic.
Yeah.
And these are imams who are not at all in favour of violence and these sorts of things, but they actually cannot come out and say so publicly.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't tell them how much of a problem they've got on their hands and doesn't tell the rest of us. So they're on the right side of history in the sense that they are trying to make sure that these people don't go and do these sorts of things. But if they were to say so publicly, they would no longer be an imam.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is the thing, right? Like, I'll tell you guys a story. I spent 3 months in Egypt. And whilst in Egypt, I ended up, like, I did the tour of the whole Egypt thing. And then I was living in Dahab for a bit. And then what happens when you're in those countries? So the first 2 days in Egypt, culture shock, terrified.
Yeah, of course.
I was 22. And it took me 2 days to literally leave my hotel.
Yeah, wow.
Because it was such a culture shock. And then, you become a little bit more emboldened, a little bit more brave. And, after a month traveling around, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. So I was living in Dahab, and that's on the Red Sea.
Okay.
Very touristy. Lots of Russian tourists, lots of Europeans, very, very few Aussies. I didn't encounter many Aussies at all. And so that's where you do all the diving. That's where the big blowhole is. So all sorts of people. It's like a 150-metre deep hole off the edge of the beach, and that's where all the free diving stuff.
Are we talking about Lily Phillips again?
No.
Right, sorry, I just wasn't sure.
Keep your mind out of the gutter. Meant to be a Christian man. Anyway, and then one day I got asked, do you want to go to Jordan? I was like, obviously. So we went to go to Petra. And we went on this bus, and it was as travel tours are, it was very interesting. But we went to Syria first, and I went to Damascus. And this is pre-ISIS. And it was beautiful. It was spectacular. The Middle East has got so much history, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And, I'm obviously a Western-looking woman, and I was very respectful. I always had a headscarf, like, not a headscarf, but like I had something over my head, just to, and I didn't want the attention. I had long sleeves on, and just to be respectful and also not to have any issues.
Yeah.
And everywhere I went, I would get people going, oh, come for tea, come please, like, come talk to me. Like, they were so excited to meet a Westerner, right? Because they get the same propaganda we get. All Westerners are bad, all Australians are terrible, all Americans are evil. And I cannot tell you how many different teas I drank and how many people invited me in for shawarmas or family food. And, the thing I love about Middle East cultures is, like, the whole family lives in the one house, like 3 generations, right? Yeah. Food was amazing, and this was 2008, so it's only 7 years post 7/11.
9/11.
9/11, sorry, 7/11.
Please come again.
Yeah. And so I just had such a great time. Then we went up to Jordan, and Jordan's very different. Jordan's obviously a kingdom. We went to, as I said, we was in Syria, and on the way down, we went via Iraq, right? I was with Russians, probably a little too brave of my behalf, and Iraq was distinctly different. The mood was very different. I felt very unsafe.
Well, this is obviously, the war was over by that point in time, but they were into kind of the insurgency
I think it was the tail end of the Iraq war, I'm pretty sure, somewhere there. Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine why the mood would be a bit different if it's a war zone. That's just so strange.
Saddam had been killed by then,
right?
Long and well and truly. I can't remember.
It's 2008. I mean, 2008's the GFC. That was so Iraq war would have been declared to have been won by 2005. Something like that,
so it's somewhere there. It was in the tail end of that.
Don't quote me. I mean, you've got Google. I don't. Yeah. Don't at me.
But there was this like sinister undertone going to Iraq. We were only there for a day, and I met a Marine who was just livid I was there. He's like, "You are too cavalier. This is a war zone. Why are you here? You need to get out of here immediately. This is not a safe play for you. You are too brazen." Yeah. He went through me, and I remember feeling a bit shaken. And then, I came back to Egypt, and that kind of just stuck with me. The reason I bring that up is like, it's very easy to be propagandized by Western media or whatever. Like, you get spoon-fed things, and if you don't have any inclination to go and either see it for yourself or read a bit further, you sort of take everything at face value. So when I hear, like, you know, Muslims are terrible and this sort of stuff, I'm like, no, I will defend them till the cows come home because I have seen them, I've experienced their hospitality. Yeah. But where I get mad at the Muslim community is when you don't call out this extremism.
Correct.
And I expected all of my Muslim friends on Instagram to immediately come out and go, this is wrong. Yeah. And nearly none of them did it.
Yeah. And this then creates the problem. If they won't draw that distinction, then the assumption that follows is there isn't a distinction.
Yeah.
And everyone actually agrees. Yeah. Now, that's not true, but where do we look to find the proof that that's not true? Yeah. It's not being offered to us right now.
So, yeah, I think this is going to, again, it's one of those things, I'm like, if you want to de-escalate things, then come out and condemn it, and that will do a little bit to help us get back to, you know, an even keel, but we're not seeing that.
All right, we're going to go through a second battery shortly.
All right,
I don't know if we have a third one for each camera, so we're blasting on.
Last thing, we're going to go through X like we did. This is the end.
Okay.
We actually got through all the points.
Did we?
We did, but we told all the stories.
Sorry.
Yeah, so don't miss another session.
Us.
Because this is what happens when I don't see you for 2 weeks. All right, so trending topics. Oh, I actually screenshot a couple. So let me pull my phone up.
Screenshots with Carly.
Screenshots with Carly. Okay, so from Ben Fordman Live, our universities have lost the plot. Macquarie University is telling students they're settlers and guests in Australia. Thoughts and opinions?
So this is going to have the same result as failing to deal with crime is going to have. When you're just going to create an atmosphere of resentment, and ultimately it's going to turn into people acting out in ways that are not at all beneficial.
It's going to push people down the other side.
This helps no one. You know, my question is, okay, so if I'm a settler, well, the UK is not my home. That's where my ancestry comes from, but I don't have a UK passport. I'm not welcome to go back. I don't have any ties or connections. At what point am I, you know, my name has been in Australia literally since the First Fleet. There was both a prisoner, a female, who had the name Field and presumably lost that name, but there was also a guard who had the name Field, and we believe that's where we're descended from, which is a shame. I would much rather be descended from the prisoner, but, you know, I'm as Australian as you can get without being Indigenous.
Yeah.
And if you're saying to me that I am not Australian, what you're saying is that no one except the Indigenous can ever be Australian. Yeah. And where it gets really weird for me is that those same people get really mad if you treat a new immigrant differently. You're like, well, hang on. Are you not treating me differently on the basis that I'm a new immigrant compared to the people that were here when my ancestors arrived? And yet, right? So I think we should treat immigrants well. Yeah. And in return, I expect to be treated well.
Well, this whole generational hatred, like, it's just contempt bred in generation to generation. I'm just sitting here going, how many years back do you want to hold people accountable for past traumas?
Imagine the stupidity of me holding a grudge against someone my age who was Japanese because of what happened during the Second World War. Yeah. It's nonsense, right? And to teach this to kids, and especially because, you know, I have a son. I've got 3 kids, a son and 2 daughters, but I've got a son, and their skin colour is similar to mine, surprise, surprise, and he's being raised in a culture that says because you're male and because you're white and because you're living in Australia, everything about you is now evil. You are now what's wrong with the world. Yeah. And to raise a kid like that, I think is basically just abuse. Yeah. That's all it is. And so this sort of messaging from Macquarie University, in my opinion, it's not true, it's not helpful, and it's not acceptable. And
I'd also say it's no dissimilar to what happened with the Germans, who were taught to hate themselves because of the crimes of the Nazis. And you've seen that now with Germany's another conversation. We'll do that next week. Yeah. Okay, next week. Apple stands firm on diversity. Shareholders reject an anti-DEI proposal.
Couldn't care less. Private company, they can do what they like. What concerns me about Apple is that they've acquiesced to the UK's demand to put a back door in so that there is no longer any end-to-end encryption on Apple devices in the UK. Now, I don't think that's been implemented yet, but I'm led to believe they've agreed to it. That, for me, is a much bigger concern. I would like to see Apple have a lot more fuck you about them. Like what we're seeing, for example, with Rumble, has told Julie Inman Grant to F off. Yep. And just now there was another one that I just posted about earlier today. It wasn't Rumble, it was Telegram, one of the other platforms. Well, Gab has as well. Actually, that's a good point. Gab has. That's not the one I'm trying to think of. I literally just posted about it just before we started recording. Julie Inman Grant has tried to impose $1 million fine on them, and they've basically told her to F off.
Yeah.
And
my favourite thing about her is her whinging about Elon Musk being an unelected bureaucrat when you are an unelected bureaucrat.
Goodness. I mean, I know these people are stupid, but can you not advertise the fact?
Yeah.
Please.
Do you hear the words coming out of your mouth and not feel embarrassed?
Yes. So on the Apple thing, I'm much more worried about the UK stuff than I am about the DEI stuff.
Okay, next one. FBI investigates Comey's alleged spying tactics on Trump. Under the leadership of Director Kash Patel, they have launched an investigation into former FBI Director James Comey.
Yes. Okay, this needs to happen in the FBI. It needs to happen in the IRS because we know that the tax department were targeting and auditing conservative organisations under Trump and then under Joe Biden after Trump was kicked out. Pretty much all the agencies, this needs to happen. And can we talk about agencies for a second? Because there's some really good stuff happening. So this whole "what did you get done this week" email idea from Musk is brilliant.
I loved your tweet this morning. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, thank you. It's a brilliant idea because there's so many dead emails out there. They're not being checked. These people aren't showing up to work, or in many cases, the person's left and they're not even being paid anymore. But that memo never came back. So let's clean all of that out. But also now under Tulsi Gabbard has actually confirmed that this is real, this is happening. Every single member of the NSA and FBI and all the rest of it that were in those chat rooms talking about all the sexual degeneracy, blah, 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 right? They're carrying on work time, on a government-funded, taxpayer-funded server. She's given the directive that every single one of those people must be identified and fired by Friday.
Yeah. So for you guys who don't know what we're talking about, it's come out now, all these leaked chat rooms, what do you call it, chat logs have come out of people in these three little agencies in some kind of they've created on the American government servers chats where they go and talk about transgenderism and
it's full on fetish stuff. So they're talking about gangbangs,
depravity.
In some cases, organising them, talking about wanting to have androgynous kids and transing their own kids and all this sort of stuff.
Just short of child pornography. That's where they stop short.
And so we're seeing a zero tolerance approach towards that. What we're seeing here, I think, is great, but it needs to go a lot further. We have seen the weaponisation of the deep state. Oh, and I loved Trump someone, I think it was a journalist, tried to do a gotcha about how he was targeting people. You're targeting people using all these agencies, blah, blah, blah. And he slammed, I spent 4 years as a president being targeted and the 4 years since being targeted. Do not talk to me about targeting. Just absolutely shut them down. So this is necessary. It's a part of the cleansing process. More of it, please. Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, last couple, I'm just going to we'll be here all day otherwise. I think we should call it. Because there's too much.
Look, if we get sucked into a scroll hole on X, we will still be recording next week. So give me a fighting chance of actually editing this thing,
And then you can write in the comments whose edit was better.
Oh, wow, now the pressure's on. Okay.
All right, guys. Well, if you appreciated this episode, please share it. Subscribe to our YouTubes, not just because we keep telling you, because it actually helps us. The more subscribers we get, the better we get views, the more we can reinvest in this podcast.
Trolls, I asked you nicely a few weeks ago. You didn't listen, so I'm going to tell you, get onto Carly's YouTube.
Jim,
and troll over there, okay?
Jim, please.
I've already got tens of thousands of subscribers on all my platforms, YouTube included. Carly needs the help.
Casually flexing over here.
Just thought I'd slip that in there.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed, actually, that's my good news. I have noticed since I'm tired. Since posting so prolifically, my YouTube is growing by about 100 people a week.
Wow.
And my X is now 1,100.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
And that's since we did the podcast.
That early growth is the hardest.
Yeah.
And it is, you're in that phase where, every single individual person is a win. So, hey, jump across to Carly's YouTube and give her another win.
And if you guys want us to talk about anything specifically, chuck it in the comments. I read them all. I don't think he does, but I do.
I used to, and now I just read. I kind of skim. I just find the ones that tell me I look nice. There haven't been any of those yet, but I'm waiting.
I find the ones that attack me. I'm like, no. Come for me about youth crime, please.
Yeah.
But that being said, make sure you subscribe, follow us on X, follow us on Instagram. All of that helps us. And if you guys want to see the production value of this podcast improve, we need more eyes on it. So help us out.
Yeah.
All right. On that note.
Ciao. See you next week.